Naruto, a new path. Ch1 the nightmare. Darkness was all he saw. It was a consuming darkness without the faintest hint of light. He tried to make sense of where he was, but couldn't place it. Even time seemed to be consumed by the endless darkness. He tried to move his hands, but found them useless. He tried to walk, but found that there was no floor beneath him. A small flash of red illuminated the darkness. He turned to the light and tried to get closer to it. No sense in staying in the darkness, he thought. He found himself floating towards the light, and as he got closer, he started making out other colors. First, he found that the light was in fact a circle. Secondly, he found that the red orb had a black slit on the center. Naruto, a voice growled. Suddenly light filled the darkness, and the figure of a giant fox filled his sight. Naruto tried to run away, but found that he couldn't move. Many thoughts raced through his head, but a single one made itself more apparent. Why was the fox out of its cage? Naruto, a new voice whimpered. The blonde turned to the source of the voice and was met with a pink-haired girl's bloody figure. She was cut in half. Her once silky pink hair was now painted crimson with blood, and her piercing green eyes were now dull and lifeless. Sakura, Naruto yelled in despair. He tried to go and aid the girl, but before he could try to move, the fox's giant paw crashed into the girl. Do you see how useless you are now? Can you finally feel the weakness that you think is strength? The fox said in amusement. Now I will show you true despair. The surroundings changed to that of a grassy plain stained with blood. Corpses could be seen everywhere. One of a black-haired teen with a bloody blue shirt, a masked man with silver hair, an old man with deep red robes that had been once white, and finally one of his first friend and teacher, Iruka. Naruto lost all air at that moment, and he couldn't help but gag at what he was seeing. Tears flowed freely from his eyes, and for the first time in years he sobbed. Pitiful human, you have seen nothing yet, the fox growled before appearing in the field and engulfing everything with fire. Naruto woke up with a start. Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks as he tried to make sense of what exactly was going on. He ran a hand through his hair and found that he was covered in sweat. He looked around and found himself on his room, laying safely on his bed. He glanced at a lone picture on his nightstand and sighed in relief. It was a picture of Team 7, where he formed his first bonds and gained a new respect for himself. When Naruto had been a kid, nobody would talk or acknowledge him. He had thought that it was because he had been initially sort of shy to talking to other kids, but when he dropped his shyness, he found that he still couldn't make friends. It was at this point that he started to think that there was something wrong with him. If nobody wanted to be his friend, then it was because he was a freak amongst everyone. The third Hokage, his grandfather figure, had told him that he was just as normal as everyone else, and that people ignored him because of their own ignorance. When his Jinchuriki status got out, Naruto had really thought of himself as a demon and nothing else. It wasn't until Iruka declared otherwise that Naruto thought of himself as his own person. After this, he had been made a ninja of the leaf and put into Team 7. Naruto smiled at how things had changed. He now had irreplaceable friends and had actually gotten into the final rounds of the Chunin exams. Of course, there had been trouble, but he and his team had managed to cope. His whole team had passed, but Sakura had been disqualified for having tied with Ino, a girl Naruto didn't really know much about except for her huge crush on Sasuke. Thinking back on the Chunin exams, Naruto couldn't help but think of Orochimaru. The man had completely trashed them without breaking a sweat and had marked Sasuke with the curse seal that messed with the teen's behavior. He had been unable to protect his friend, much like the time when Haku, a boy he met on his first mission, had killed Sasuke. Both times Naruto had relied on the Kyuubi's help to protect his friends. Naruto shuddered at the thought of Kyuubi. Thinking of the nine-tailed fox had brought back the nightmare he had just woken up from. It had all been so real, and he had been too weak to do anything. It had just been a dream, but it did have a lot of truth in it. Naruto hadn't been able to help his friends with his own powers and had been forced to use the Kyuubi to protect them, a creature who would want nothing more than to burn them all to ashes. Naruto felt truly weak for the first time since he had been made Genin. In order to protect his friends, Naruto had to train hard and get stronger. Yes, Naruto whispered, I will not let anybody hurt my friends ever again. Naruto got out of bed and picked up his scattered clothes. First, he picked up his orange pants and black shirt. He quickly put them on and walked over to his discarded jacket next. As he put on the jacket, he thought of cleaning the apartment. It had just been 1.5 months since he cleaned it, but he felt that it was better to clean it now before it got dirty. He walked towards the door of his apartment, while avoiding stepping on any of the pieces of trash that were on the floor, and put on his ninja sandals. A quick jog around town would certainly clear his head from the dream. When he got out of his apartment, he noted that it was still dark out. With a shrug, he jumped out of the building and raced to the one place that would help him calm down, the Hokage Monument. Ever since the third had taken him there, Naruto had made it his special spot. Something about sitting on the head of his idol, the fourth Hokage, seemed to calm him down. He remembered that it had been there that he decided to be Hokage. At that time, he had only thought of being acknowledged, but now that he thought about it, he really didn't know what being Hokage was about. He knew that it would be a long time until he knew the real reason behind being Hokage. A Hokage was responsible for protecting everybody in the village, but what made them want to protect them? What was that which drove them to put their lives before the village? Naruto promised himself to answer these questions, but for now he knew one thing. That nightmare with the QB had opened his eyes. Right now he was weak, but with enough training, he would be strong enough to protect all of his precious people. Maybe this was the path into learning the answer for the reason for being Hokage, but for now he would only focus on getting stronger in order to protect his friends. Do you hear that? Naruto yelled at the village. The sun rose and shined on the whiskered blonde, showing the determination on his blue eyes. I won't let anyone hurt my friends. No more games. From now on, I won't let anybody down. Ch2 How to Improve. Naruto was walking towards the ninja academy. It was now around 11 in the morning, so it would be recess at the academy, meaning that he could talk to Iruka. Earlier today, Naruto had had an epiphany of sorts and sought to make himself stronger, but he had no idea how. All that Naruto had done before was beg for a new jutsu, and now that he thought about it, it really wasn't a way to get stronger. Sure, you had a powerful jutsu, but if you didn't have the proper training, then the jutsu wouldn't be at its fullest strength, and it would take time to hit a skilled opponent. Naruto decided that in order to improve, he would go to the root of things, in this case the academy. Iruka had known Naruto almost as long as the third and had a good idea of what Naruto's shortcomings were. The blonde entered the academy and headed for Iruka's classroom. It was a little nostalgic to walk in the hallways of the academy, and he couldn't help but smile at the memories. Sure, they weren't the happiest of memories since he had been an outcast and had been alienated by everyone, but there were still some happy memories. Like the times he would play pranks with Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba. Those had been simpler times where he would only worry of what flavor of ramen he would get if Iruka took him out to eat. Now he had to worry about missions, getting stronger, and most of all protecting those precious to him. Hey Iruka-sensei, Naruto said with a smile. Naruto? Iruka exclaimed with a smile, long time no see. What are you doing here? Well, Naruto trailed off and turned his gaze towards the open window that had a clear view of the academy students playing ninja. Iruka gave Naruto a concerned expression. It wasn't normal for Naruto to be serious. Naruto's fists tightened before he looked up at Iruka again, this time with determination burning on his eyes. I want to get stronger. Naruto said in complete seriousness, I want to be able to protect those close to me, and in order to do it, I have to get much stronger. Naruto, Iruka whispered with a small smile. He was proud that his former student had found a drive to get stronger. Many ninjas had different drives, some had revenge, need to be recognized, and some did it for honor. So I wanted to ask you about what you think I should improve on. Naruto looked at Iruka with nothing but seriousness written on his face. I know that you haven't been my sensei for a long time, but I want to know what my weaknesses were when I was here. Iruka smiled proudly at his student. Leave it to Naruto to surprise him like this. Well, Naruto, back when you were here, you had little to no talent in Jinjutsu. Your ninjutsu was. Iruka thought back to the sexy jutsu and cleared his throat. Your ninjutsu showed great promise while your taijutsu showed little. I know that you have improved in both of those. Your match with Kiba proved it, but I see that you still have some problems with Jinjutsu. Naruto ran a hand through his hair, a habit he had when he thought of something to be difficult. So you're saying that all my skills need work? Iruka shook his head. Not at all, Naruto. What I'm saying is that your Jinjutsu was the one that needed the most work. He said, I suggest that you go ask Kakashi what he thinks also since he's the most familiar with your current skills. I got it. Naruto smiled at Irika and walked to the door. I'll go look for Kakashi-sensei now. Thanks for everything. With that, Naruto ran out of the room with a smile. Irika chuckled. That Naruto. He never ceases to surprise me. Naruto was currently on Team 7's training grounds. He had been looking for Kakashi in several places, but hadn't found him. He had first tried the bookstore that Kakashi visited frequently. Next, he tried the Memorial Stone, but he hadn't been there either. With no more options, Naruto decided to look on the training grounds. Yo, a voice said behind him. Naruto almost jumped out of his skin and glared at Kakashi. What the hell was that? You can't just go and appear behind someone like that. Kakashi smiled at Naruto. I see that you were looking for me. Naruto gave the Jonin a puzzled look. How did you know? Easy, I've been following you. Kakashi said. When I was going to the bookstore, I saw you approach it. At first, I thought that I would finally meet another person who enjoyed the perfection that is the Makeout series, but I saw you leave and go to the Memorial Stone. It was at this point that I knew you were looking for me. Naruto smiled at his sensei. Well, I do have a favor to ask. What is it? The Jonin asked. Naruto's face turned serious and he looked at Kakashi in the eye. I want you to tell me what my strengths and weaknesses are and to tell me what to improve on. Kakashi raised a visible brow at this. It wasn't typical Naruto behavior to ask for an evaluation. Just yesterday, he had been shouting that he would pass the Chunin exams without breaking a sweat. What brought this change, Naruto? Naruto sighed and clenched his fists. He really didn't want to remember the nightmare. I just felt as if I wasn't strong enough to protect my friends. Naruto turned his gaze towards the small lake on the side of the training grounds. I want to get stronger in order to protect them. Kakashi gazed proudly at his student. If only his sensei could see him. Well, Naruto, from what I see, you have a lot to improve on, but not by a lot. First, you have to expand your jutsu list. So far, you only know the Shadow Clone. I'll give you some scrolls with jutsu, depending on your elemental affinity, but we'll get to that later. You also have to work on a way to dispel Jinjutsu, since you have no talent in it. Your taijutsu is neither bad or good, so I suggest picking out a style and working on it. Kakashi took out a small paper from his pocket and handed it to Naruto. Now I want you to pour some chakra into the paper. This will tell us your elemental affinity. Naruto did as instructed and watched as the paper split in half. What does that mean, sensei? Kakashi nodded before taking out a few scrolls. It means that you have a wind affinity. This is probably the most dangerous element since it's not only powerful but also really hard to control. Kakashi gave the scrolls to Naruto. Those contain some of the wind jutsu that I have copied over the years, but you cannot attempt to use them until you have trained with wind chakra. Naruto nodded at Kakashi. Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei, I give you my word that I won't do that. Naruto gave a confused look and ran a hand through his hair. But how will I train with wind chakra? Kakashi smiled at his student. Well, Naruto, in order to be able to use wind jutsu safely, you need to complete 2 exercises. First, you have to split a leaf in half using your chakra. Kakashi picked up a leaf and split it in half. The cut has to be clean. If it isn't a perfect split, then you have to try again until you get one. The second exercise is much like the first, only this time you have to cut a rock in half. This will require more chakra meaning than the leaf exercise, but I'm sure you'll pull through. Naruto smiled in excitement. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei, I'll do my best. He pocketed the scrolls and turned to leave. See you later, sensei. Naruto, wait, Kakashi instructed. What is it? Naruto asked. I want you to meet me here tomorrow at 10 in the morning. We'll discuss your training for the Chunin exams. Kakashi said, I don't want you to be late. Naruto's sweat dropped. This coming from you, sensei. Naruto deadpanned. Fine, I won't be late. With that, Naruto left the training grounds, set on splitting the leaf that same day. Naruto sat against a tree with a leaf on hand. He had been trying the leaf exercise but couldn't make the smallest of cuts. It had been 4 hours since his talk with Kakashi, and Naruto now knew why Kakashi had said that wind was the hardest element to control. Naruto was always the impatient one, and so he couldn't stay still for a long time. It was one of the other things Naruto would need to work on since he would probably have to do stealth-type missions in the future. Naruto gave a foxy grin thinking about all of the missions he could take when he got stronger. Sure, he wanted to be able to protect his friends, but that didn't mean that he would dedicate his whole life to it. Once again, Naruto poured chakra into the leaf. For some reason, his chakra control had gotten a lot worse, and he wasn't able to focus it. He tried to think of sharp things as he tried to mold his chakra. He finally pictured a sword and tried to imitate it with wind chakra. When he finally got tired, Naruto looked at the leaf and saw a small nick on the bottom. It wasn't much, but it was something. At least it showed that he was on the right track. Naruto grinned. Only a few adjustments on the chakra, and I'll be able to cut the leaf in no time. Naruto, again, poured chakra into the leaf before trying to make it take the shape of a sword, but it was too hard to focus his chakra. Damn, I need to work on my chakra control again. I guess I got a little rusty somehow. Naruto noticed that it was getting late. If he had to guess, he would say that it was at least 6 in the afternoon. He heard his stomach growl and decided that it was time to eat. Maybe a visit to Ichiraku's would get his chakra control back to normal. Naruto sighed happily and got up. He stretched a little before going back to the village. He had gone to a small clearing near Team 7's training grounds and found it to be a good place for his training. He could have gone to train at the actual training grounds, but there were always people going there, and that would surely disrupt his training. Naruto dismissed those thoughts. He was now in town, thanks to him jumping through the roofs of the village, and he could smell ramen in the air, the very meal that had been made by gods and brought to the humble hands of humans. He took in the smell and closed his eyes, letting his nose guide him to his next meal. He suddenly bumped into something soft and fell on his butt. "Watch where you're going." He heard a feminine voice snap. "Naruto?" Naruto opened his eyes and was met with platinum blonde hair and blue eyes. "Ino?" Naruto got up and dusted his pants. "What are you doing here?" Ino's eye twitched. "Aren't you supposed to help me get up?" Ino was still where she had fallen and pointed at herself. "Why would I do that?" Naruto asked in confusion. Ino sighed. "Just help me up, will you?" Ino held her hand up and Naruto took it on his. The contact of their bare hands touching made them both blush lightly. Thanks." Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Sure, no problem." He noticed that Ino was on her civilian clothes, meaning that she was probably on a break from her ninja duties. "So, what are you doing out here?" "I'm out looking for something to eat." Ino explained. "Since my parents are away, I don't have anything to eat at home." Naruto nodded in understanding. "Hey, how about going to eat with me?" Naruto smiled at Ino and took out his frog wallet. "I'm on my way there since I'm pretty hungry since I've been training all day." Ino looked slightly shocked. "You want to go with me?" Ino had a light blush on her face at the thought of being asked out to eat by a boy. It was true that she acted like a flirt around Sasuke, but deep down she was a shy girl. Not Hinata level, but still shy. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure, let's go." With that, Naruto took Ino's hand and ran to Ichiraku's. Just smelling their ramen from far away had his mouth watering. He was completely unaware of Ino's light blush, of course. The two entered the stand and sat down. Soon a man wearing an apron came out. The man had a face that talked of joy and peace. It gave the stand a homey feeling. The man's name was Tucci, and he was one of the people who didn't hold any resentment for Naruto because of the fox sealed inside of him. He and his daughter, Ayam, had been some of the first people that were precious to Naruto. "Hey there, Naruto, who's your friend?" Tucci asked with a smile. Naruto grinned and pointed to the fellow blonde. "This is Ino. She was looking for a place to eat, so I took her here." Naruto explained. "Where's Ayam?" Tucci grinned and crossed his arms across his chest. "She went out to buy some ingredients for a new flavor of ramen I'm creating." The man knew what this would do to the boy, and the reaction was always funny. Naruto's eyes widened and his body stiffened. Ino looked at him oddly and noticed that he was shaking slightly. "A new ramen flavor," Naruto exclaimed with glee. "Are you looking for someone to give you their opinion?" Tucci chuckled and shook his head. "Thanks for volunteering, Naruto." Tucci said. "As always, the first 2 bowls will be on the house." "All right," Naruto exclaimed in happiness. It might have looked like a bad move on Tucci's part, but considering what Naruto consumed, it wasn't so bad. Ino looked at Naruto oddly. She hadn't seen this side of Naruto ever since she met him. He was still loud, but he looked calmer and happier than all the other times she had seen him. When she thought about it, she never got to know the blonde. When they were in the academy, she wasn't interested in getting to know him. Unlike the other kids, who treated Naruto like the plague, she treated him like she treated everyone else. It wasn't until Naruto beat Kiba, taking everyone by surprise, that she was interested in learning more of the blonde. "What will you two have?" Tucci asked with a smile. "I'll have miso ramen and keep them coming." Naruto smiled and turned to Ino. What are you going to get? Ino took a menu from the table and skimmed through it. I'll have one bowl of chicken ramen. Ino put the menu back down and saw that Naruto was looking at her funny. What's wrong? Naruto eyed Ino oddly and looked her up and down. Why are you getting only one bowl? You should get more than one. Naruto said, the ramen here tastes so good that you have to have more than one. Ino frowned. I'm not like you. I have to keep my figure and I can't go eating as many ramen bowls as I want. She crossed her arms and turned away from Naruto. Why'd you get mad? Naruto asked with an odd look. It's not like you'll gain weight. We're ninja, we're always exercising. Why are you watching what you eat? Ino sighed. You just don't understand, woman. Naruto. Tucci arrived with the bowls and set them in front of the two teens. Unlike you, I control what I eat. Naruto and Ino walked on the streets of Konoha. They were on their way to Ino's house since she said it was what a gentleman was supposed to do. Naruto didn't really understand this, but simply did as Ino instructed. The sun was setting and there were a few people walking on the streets. Ino noticed the looks they gave to Naruto, but saw that he was blissfully unaware of them. They were the same looks parents would give Naruto when they went to pick up their kids. It was a look of fear mixed with resentment. She was pulled out of her thoughts when a hand was waved in front of her. Hey Ino, are you okay? Naruto continued to wave his hand until Ino pushed it away. So you are alive after all. Ino blushed in embarrassment. What do you want? Ino snapped with a tick mark. Naruto pointed at the houses on the street. Where's your house? You said that it was on this block, but you didn't say which one it was. He explained. Ino sighed. I don't know, Naruto. Maybe it's the house that has a sign with my last name. Ino pointed at a house with a sign that read Yamanaka Flower Shop. Naruto pouted and crossed his arms. That's a lot of talk from someone who had 4 bowls of ramen. The air got cold and Ino glared at Naruto. What was that? She hissed with a tightened fist. Naruto laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head. The two walked to the house and went in. Naruto looked at all the different flowers displayed on the shop. He had always been a little interested in gardening. He had a few plants on his apartment to prove it. He was first interested on them when he learned that some plants had different uses. Plants grew around Konoha, so it was no trouble for Naruto to pick wild ones and put them in a vase. The flowers being an awesome color orange was just icing on the cake. Ino looked at Naruto in confusion. What are you doing? She had seen Naruto staring at the flowers and was wondering what he was up to. Are you interested in flowers? Naruto smiled and shook his head. I own some plants, but I'm only a little interested in them. He explained. Ino looked at Naruto in wonder. The teen was full of surprises. She would have never thought that energetic Naruto would have the time to do something as calming as tend to flowers. Well, thanks for agreeing to go with me. Naruto said, you're actually the first person that has agreed to go with me other than Irika-sensei. Ino smiled at the blonde. It was actually kind of fun, getting to know you, I mean. She found herself blushing lightly and scolded herself for being so shy deep down. Naruto returned the smile and walked over to Ino. I thought so too. We should go out again sometime. Naruto asked with a glint of hope on his eyes. If you don't want to, I'll understand. And no, it'll be fine. Ino responded, I'd like that. You're a really interesting person, and I'd like to get to know you better. Naruto gave his foxy grin and put something on Ino's hand. I have to go. I'll see you later, Ino. With that, Naruto ran out of the store. Ino watched Naruto's retreating figure and smiled. He was certainly an interesting person who she wouldn't mind getting to know better. She felt like she could be her own self when she was with him and knew that they would become good friends. The white rose on her hand was proof enough of that. The next day, Naruto was up by 8 in the morning. He took a shower, got dressed, ate a light breakfast, since he had a little money left from the Zabuza mission. Naruto had put most of his money on what he called his I'm out of ramen money. He didn't care much about material possessions, and so it was rare of him to use money buying material things. He would only use the money for food and bills. After finishing his morning routine, Naruto had gone to the training grounds. It was 8:30 in the morning, but he figured that he could use that time to work on cutting the leaf. He was glad with his progress so far. Now that he had the basic concept of the exercise down, everything else would soon follow. The only thing that made it harder to cut the leaf was his terrible chakra control. He guessed that it had gone down due to natural causes, but would ask Kakashi about it later since he still had other things to worry about. For one, he didn't know where he would get a new taijutsu style. He couldn't ask just anyone since most were already training their own students. It was at times like this that Naruto wished Kakashi had Guy's enthusiasm. Naruto pictured Kakashi wearing a green jumpsuit and striking a nice guy pose for just 1 second and instantly knew that Kakashi was okay the way he was. When Naruto got to the training ground, he began to work on the leaf. He wished there was a way to make the training go faster, but knew that he was also training on controlling his emotions. He had read about meditating once before during his academy days. Meditation was a way for a ninja to get to know their own bodies chakra-wise. Naruto thought about doing this some other time since he didn't have the time to meditate at the moment. Kakashi would arrive soon. "Good to see you're already here, Naruto," came the voice of Kakashi. It had been 2 hours since Naruto had arrived, but he didn't complain. In fact, Naruto was glad that Kakashi had been a little late since it had given him time to work on the leaf. So far he had made minuscule progress, but it was progress after all. Naruto noticed that the closet pervert was with Kakashi. What was his name? Ibusa? "This is Ebisu, one of the best jounin in Konoha." Kakashi explained, "I'll be training Sasuke and will be very busy with it. Ebisu will teach you a kind of chakra control. It's called water walking. It's similar to tree walking, only this time you have to use your chakra to stand on something that is not solid." Naruto frowned. He knew that Ebisu was one of the people who thought of him as a pest. "I got it, Kakashi-sensei." He would keep quiet for now. If the man had agreed to train him, who was he to object? Kakashi smiled before disappearing in a cloud of smoke, leaving Naruto and Ebisu alone. It was a good thing that the man wore glasses since Naruto hated the look he was surely giving him. "Let us go now, Naruto. I'll show you to our place of training." With that, the man leapt away with Naruto trailing behind him. Naruto noticed that the man was going a little too fast, but didn't voice his opinion. Complaining didn't get him anywhere on the past, and wouldn't get him anywhere now. They arrived to a local hot springs. For some reason, the place always had costumers, though the climate at the Konoha was mild. They would close whenever it got too cold, but it almost never happened. They lived a few hours away from a desert, for crying out loud. This is why Naruto was eyeing Ebisu in confusion. He had no idea why they would train in a hot springs, and was beginning to think that the man wouldn't train him. Ebisu cleared his throat. "Okay, Naruto, do you see that hot spring there?" The man pointed to a lone hot spring before proceeding. "You will train on your water walking there." Naruto walked to the hot spring and looked confused. "What's so special about this hot spring?" Ebisu chuckled. "Let's just say that it will motivate you to do your best." Naruto shrugged and stood on the edge of the hot spring. He gathered chakra on his feet and stepped on the water. His feet sunk a little, but it was okay otherwise. It wasn't until he put his other foot on the spring that he sunk. The moment his skin touched the water, Naruto jumped out with a yell and glared at Ebisu. "What the hell was that?" "That thing is boiling," Naruto exclaimed with a frown. "It is necessary for your training, Naruto. Now get to it again," Ebisu exclaimed in a commanding tone. Naruto scowled and continued to try to do the exercise. After 3 more failed tries, Naruto ran a hand through his hair and growled. This exercise was really annoying, and the boiling water didn't make it any better. He suddenly heard the sound of giggling and turned towards the sound. The giggling came from an old man peeking through a small hole at the woman's hot springs. Naruto frowned. Here he was training to the bone while some old man was spying on woman. He saw that Ebisu, ever the gentleman, was stomping towards the man with a frown. "Excuse me, sir, but what are you doing?" Ebisu asked with a frown. The man turned away from the small hole he had made on the wall and frowned at Ebisu. "I'm doing my research now, be a sport and leave." The man turned to the hole again and began to write furiously on a small notepad he had taken out of his coat. Ebisu tried to move the man away, but the man proved to be too quick and sidestepped. Before anybody knew what happened, the man made a giant frog appear right on top of Ebisu. The poor man was knocked unconscious on the spot. Naruto stared at the white-haired man in awe. "Who are you?" The man turned to Naruto and smiled. He jumped on top of the toad, both of them ignoring the groan coming from Ebisu, and struck a pose. "I am the great Jiraiya of the Sannin." Ch3 the great Jiraiya. Naruto didn't know what to do. He had just met a legendary ninja that was said to rival the Hokage in terms of strength. Yet the man had been spying on women when they were bathing and had knocked out his teacher for the Chunin exam finals. The little dance Jiraiya did when announcing his name hadn't made things any better, and Naruto presumed that the man thought of himself as cool. "Why did you knock out my teacher?" Naruto asked with a frown. Jiraiya smirked. "Like I told him, I was busy with my research and can't be bothered at the moment." The Sannin smiled and held up his notebook. "This notebook holds the first notes for my new Makeout Paradise." Naruto narrowed his eyes. He had heard the name of that book before, but where? A sudden image of a giggling Kakashi entered his thoughts. "You're the one who writes the book Kakashi-sensei reads, right? So you know a fan?" Jiraiya asked with a smile. "I can't say I'm surprised since my books are known all throughout the nations." Naruto frowned. "You're nothing but a lowly pervert, aren't you?" The blonde's frown turned into a grin. "I know how to deal with guys like you." "As if you could do anything against me," Jiraiya boasted. Sexy jutsu. With a puff of smoke, Naruto transformed into a naked and older female version of himself. Jiraiya's jaw hit the floor before fainting with a massive nosebleed. Naruto grinned. "Serves the perv right." The teen walked over to Ebisu's fallen form before sighing. "I guess water walking is postponed for now. I might as well go work on the leaf so I can start with my new jutsus." With that, Naruto left the hot springs in order to go train. Naruto arrived at the clearing he had been using to train lately. The sun was high in the sky, meaning that it was around noon. The teen took a fallen leaf from the floor and sat against a tree. He had been thinking of trying to meditate while attempting to cut the leaf. If successful, then it would kill two birds with one stone, and he could go on to train in other things he needed to improve. Naruto frowned. All he had done was try to cut the leaf, but he still needed to train his taijutsu and find a way to counter Jinjutsu. Not to mention that it would probably take him a while to learn the jutsu Kakashi had left him. The blonde sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He needed to improve a lot, but had little time left for the Chunin exams. Maybe he should ask someone else to help him train. He suspected that Ebisu wouldn't train him seriously because of the fox. The blonde shook his head in order to clear his head. Now was not the time to be thinking about how hard it would be to improve. Now was the time to train. With a confident grin, Naruto tried to cut the leaf once again. No matter how long it would take him to get strong, he would never quit. Jiraiya watched the blonde with a grin. The kid could have been enjoying a day with his friends, but instead chose to train. Contrary to popular belief, Jiraiya knew a good ninja when he saw one. Just by looking at the kid, he was reminded of his younger self. The kid would get far, but he could get farther with the aid of a Sannin, and Jiraiya was the one for the job. Naruto sighed as he ran a hand through his sweaty head. It had been a few hours since he started to attempt the leaf exercise once again, and he was growing impatient. It was actually an improvement for Naruto to have stayed still so long, but his short temper combined with the hot air hitting his skin were about to set off the teen. In his hands, the leaf was still gripped tightly, with only a very small improvement. The blonde finally growled and took his hands away from the leaf. He checked his work and saw that he had cut a visible amount of the leaf this time. He managed to smile a little at the small show of improvement. At least he was on the right track. "Looks like you're having some problems with the leaf exercise," came the voice of Jiraiya. Naruto turned towards the voice and saw Jiraiya walking towards him. "Oh great, you found me." The blonde sighed. "What do you want, perv?" Jiraiya smiled coyly. "Now that's no way to talk to someone who's willing to help you, is it?" The Sannin smirked at Naruto's confused look. "Let's just say that I have a way to help you with your terrible chakra control." Naruto frowned. "My chakra control is not terrible." The blonde crossed his arms. "Whatever gave you that idea?" "I've been watching you try to cut the leaf for a while now, so don't try to lie to me," Jiraiya said with an amused grin. "So how about I help you?" "How will you do that?" Naruto asked. "Easy. I just need you to take off your shirt," Jiraiya explained. The Sannin saw Naruto give him a shocked look and scowled. "Don't get any funny ideas, kid. I only like beautiful women." Naruto gave Jiraiya another look before taking off his jacket and shirt. He instantly felt some of the terrible heat leave his body, and he wondered why he hadn't taken off his jacket before. The blonde gave Jiraiya an odd look. The Sannin was eyeing his stomach in deep seriousness. He couldn't know about the fox, could he? Jiraiya smiled and moved away from Naruto's stomach. "Just as I thought. There's something wrong with the seal keeping the QB locked away." The Sannin explained. "Don't worry, kid. I know just what to do." Before Naruto could ask what it was, he was struck on the stomach by Jiraiya. Naruto got the wind knocked out of him and cursed the Sannin. He felt a burning sensation where the seal was, but it soon left. What the hell was that? Naruto exclaimed. The Sannin smirked. Just try to cut the leaf again, and everything will be explained. Naruto frowned, but followed Jiraiya's orders. He put a leaf on his hands and started to pour and mold chakra. On his other training sessions, he found that molding the chakra into a kind of blade worked the best. The blonde did just that and kept on focusing on his task. Let's see how you did, Jiraiya commanded. The teen took his hands away from the leaf and got a big smile on his face. No longer was there only a small part of the leaf sliced. Now about 1/4 of the leaf had been cut. The blonde couldn't believe that Jiraiya had actually known how to help him. Naruto turned to the Sannin with a smile. Thanks a lot, pervy sage. What did you call me? Jiraiya exclaimed. The blonde smirked. I called you pervy sage, it kind of suits you. Jiraiya crossed his arms and frowned. Well, I guess that I won't take you as my apprentice after all. The Sannin watched Naruto's shocked expression in amusement. He turned to leave and waited for Naruto to try to stop him. I'll be on my way then. Naruto tried to think of something to do and quickly got an idea. Sexy jutsu. Jiraiya turned around at the mention of the jutsu and got a perverted grin on his face. Please train me, Jiraiya-sensei. Of course I'll train you, Jiraiya exclaimed. Naruto smirked and dropped the transformation. Jiraiya snapped out of his daze and frowned at the influence that jutsu had over him. Naruto, on the other hand, was smiling in joy and excitement at having a Sannin train him. This way he would be able to protect his friends in no time. Jiraiya sighed. Okay kid, you got me. He crossed his arms and faced Naruto with seriousness on his face. Now let's talk about your training. What are you working on as of right now? Naruto put on a look of thought. Well, I've been working on my wind chakra control, but I also need to work on my taijutsu and gain a way to counter jinjutsu. But the wind chakra training has been taking up all of my time. Jiraiya nodded in understanding. How many jutsu do you know? Naruto laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head. Well, I know how to do shadow clones, but that's about it. The Sannin raised a brow at this. He had no idea that a kid could actually use shadow clones. Even though he was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, it was an amazing feat. It was actually a good thing that Naruto knew how to use shadow clones since it would give him more time to train the kid in different subjects. Do you know the true use of the shadow clones? Jiraiya asked. At seeing Naruto's confused look, he continued. You see, shadow clones were made for spying purposes. They are not only solid, but they are able to transfer their experiences to the user. We are going to use them to train you in different subjects at the same time. Naruto got an excited smile on his face. What will those things be, Jiraiya-sensei? Jiraiya smiled. Seeing the blonde kid call him Jiraiya-sensei, he couldn't help but remember the good times he had with Minato. It was somehow a true coincidence that he ended up training them both, but then again, maybe it had been fate. Your training will be divided into 3 categories. Jiraiya explained. First, I'll teach you some of the toad taijutsu that I know. After that, you will finish that water walking I saw you practicing at the hot springs, and finally, I will teach you how to summon toads. The wind chakra control will be done on your free time. When will we start? Naruto asked with an excited smile. The training will start tomorrow at 8 in the morning. I will come get you and take you to a great spot for training. I expect that we'll be done by 5 in the afternoon, so it'll give you some time to master your wind control. Jiraiya took out his notebook and grinned. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some research to do. With that, the Sannin disappeared and left a frowning Naruto alone. The blonde huffed and turned to go home. At least I have someone to train me now. As long as I don't become a pervert, then I'll be fine. Jiraiya giggled as he wrote furiously on his notebook. He and Naruto had gone to a waterfall in order to train his water walking. That much was true, but what Jiraiya didn't tell him was that it was one of his favorite places to do his research. When they had started training early in the morning, Naruto had gotten down most of the toad-style taijutsu. After the taijutsu portion of the training was over, he had Naruto fight one of his clones while water walking. The brat had made good progress, and it would only a matter of time before he was finished. Jiraiya had to admit that he was impressed at the level at which the kid learned. The Sannin heard a loud cheer followed by a round of laughter and instantly knew that his student was done with water walking. Naruto turned towards Jiraiya and grinned. You better stop peeking on those girls, Jiraiya-sensei. I beat the clone, and that means that you have to teach me how to summon toads. Jiraiya sighed and dropped down from the tree. All right already. Jiraiya exclaimed with a frown. Sheesh kid, has anybody ever told you that you're too loud? A lot of people actually, Naruto confessed. As long as you know that, Jiraiya said with an annoyed expression as he took off the scroll he carried on his lower back. The Sannin opened the large scroll, and Naruto could see that there were 2 names written in blood. I need you to sign this using your blood. It's the first step in using the summoning jutsu. Naruto smiled in excitement. No problem, pervy sage. The blonde bit his thumb and drew blood. He began to write his name next to the one that read Minato Namikaze. All done. Jiraiya couldn't help but sigh. Maybe having a hyperactive blonde as an apprentice wouldn't be that good after all. Now you need to do the hand signs I taught you. Remember that the toad summon depends on the amount of chakra you put into it. Naruto smiled and went through the hand signs. He slammed his hands into the ground and watched as a poof of smoke appeared. He smiled in excitement, but groaned when he saw a small green toad had appeared. What did I do wrong? Naruto whined with a frown. I told you to put more chakra into it. Jiraiya scolded. Now do it one more time, but put more chakra into it. The blonde frowned and did as instructed, only to summon a slightly bigger purple toad. Naruto growled and went through the seals one more time, only to summon the previous green toad. Jiraiya frowned. It looks like he'll have to use that chakra after all. That's enough, kid, Jiraiya said. Ignoring Naruto's complaints, we have to go over some things now. The teen groaned, but walked over to Jiraiya. What are we going over now, Jiraiya-sensei? The toad Sannin chuckled. We have to start a new training schedule. I didn't plan on you learning to water walk so quickly, so we have to make some changes. Jiraiya explained. We'll still work on your taijutsu first, but it will grow on level as time goes on. Right after the taijutsu, we'll be having sparring matches to help you learn how to use it in battle. After the sparring, I'll help you with your wind chakra control. Jiraiya continued. When the wind training is over, I'll teach you the basics of sealing. The art of sealing is very useful to ninja, and if you have enough skill, you can create your own seals. When we're done with that, you'll continue to try and summon bigger toads. Naruto nodded. I got it, Jiraiya-sensei, but will I still be able to train on my free time? Jiraiya grinned. You're welcome to train whenever you want, but I assure you that you won't have the energy to do so when I'm done with you. The Sannin had a glint on his eye that made Naruto shiver involuntarily. We're done for today. I'll see you tomorrow morning, kid. The Sannin disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Naruto sighed in contempt and stretched his sore muscles. He couldn't wait to get started with his training, but that glint on Jiraiya's eye had told him that he'll be in pain in the future. The blonde chuckled and summoned 2 clones, like Jiraiya had instructed, and began to work on cutting the leaf. The sun was setting when Naruto was making his way home. For the first time in years, Naruto was tired. It had been a long day, and he knew that it would be nothing compared to what was to come. He walked through the streets and played his oblivious act. He had learned how to pretend that he didn't notice the stares the villagers threw at him, but he could still feel the gazes on him. How he hoped that the stares would stop. Naruto. He heard a voice scream. The blonde turned around and was met with the sight of Ino running towards him. What's wrong, Ino? Naruto asked as Ino tried to catch her breath. Ino frowned and pointed at Naruto's clothes. Look at you, Naruto. You're a mess. Naruto took a look at his clothes and noticed that his clothes were in fact cut up in some places and filled with dirt. What happened to you? Naruto grinned lightly. I was training with Jiraiya-sensei. The blonde answered. I think I was cut up when he tried to teach me how to block a kunai with my new taijutsu. Ino sighed. Naruto, you have blood in your jacket. Ino said in concern. You're coming with me. Going where? Naruto asked in slight concern. Ino took hold of Naruto's sleeve and dragged him with her. I'm going to take you home and clean your wounds. Naruto stiffened. Hey, are you sure your parents will be okay with me being there? He asked in alarm. I don't want to bother them. The girl chuckled. Are you kidding? She asked with a smile. They've wanted to meet you for a while. The blonde's eyes widened. Are you serious? He asked incredulously. Why would they want to meet me? Ino sighed. Naruto, you're a great guy. She said with a small smile. You beat Kiba by not giving up and took everyone by surprise. Ever since you became a ninja, my parents have wanted to meet you. Naruto nodded slowly. Okay, let's go. He managed to say. He didn't understand why they would want to meet him, but if Ino really wanted him to go, then he would. They were friends after all. The blonde watched the streets around him in wonder. He didn't go to this part of town frequently, since almost everyone hated him on these parts. The time he had walked Ino home, this certain fact had slipped his mind. Again, he found himself being the target of many glares. He noticed that Ino had seen the stairs and wished that she didn't mention them. He would continue to play his oblivious act and hope that she wouldn't mention them. The blonde saw the Yamanaka sign only a few houses away and smiled in relief. Ino smiled, as if proud of the sign that hung on her home. We're here, she declared before taking Naruto's sleeve and dragging him in through the front door. Mom, I'm home. Naruto's heartbeat increased when he heard approaching footsteps. He was always afraid of meeting with adults since most of them blamed him for the QB. He only hoped that this wouldn't be the case. Welcome home, Ino, a blonde woman said as she entered the living room. The woman turned her gaze to Naruto, who stiffened at her gaze. Who's your friend, Ino? Ino smiled. This is Naruto. She pointed at the woman and turned to Naruto. This is my mom, Miki. Miki smiled at the boy. She saw how nervous he was about meeting her, and it didn't surprise her. She was sad to see what the village had done to the boy. He was completely nervous about meeting a single person. Miki had always been amazed at the strength the boy showed. She had seen him walk through the village with a heartbreaking look on his face, but the boy was now a ninja of the leaf. Nice to meet you, Naruto, Miki said in a soft tone. Would you like anything to drink? I'll be okay, ma'am, Naruto said quietly. Ino gave Naruto an odd look. What's wrong, Naruto? Why are you so quiet? She whispered to him. It's not like she'll eat you alive or anything. Naruto kept his gaze to the ground and only grunted in response. Ino threw her mom an apologetic look and dragged Naruto upstairs. Miki glanced sadly at Naruto's disappearing figure. She hadn't known that the boy was so afraid of adults. She remembered meeting him once before when he was about 7, if she had to guess. The boy had been pushed out of a store by the owner for no apparent reason, and she had tried to help him up. The boy had looked at her with complete fear before running away from the spot. It was sad to see what the ignorance of the villagers had done to the boy. Meanwhile, Ino sat Naruto on a chair in her room. Her room was painted in a very light color purple. Her bed had dark purple blankets with light purple pillows. The room suited Ino very well and went with her personality really well. Speaking of Ino, she had gone to get her first aid kit. Ino entered the room with a frown. Why did you ignore my mom like that? Naruto lowered his gaze and sighed. I really didn't mean to, Ino. He said with a sad expression, I'm just not good with adults. Ino's face softened and she sighed. I'll let you off the hook this once, she said with a small smile. But if you ever ignore my mom, okay, you'll pay the consequences. Naruto gulped and laughed nervously. It won't happen again, I promise. Good, she said before checking Naruto for any wounds. Naruto and Ino walked out of her house. Naruto had been wary of bumping into Ino's mom, but thankfully didn't see her on the way. He hated being afraid of meeting adult strangers. He didn't have this fear towards other ninja since most of them had treated him fairly unlike the villagers who all treated him with resentment. Ino looked at her friend sadly. The blonde had a look of exhaustion on his face that seemed alien on his face. Why do you train so hard? She asked. I know you want to be a chunin, but isn't this a bit too much? Naruto gave a small smile and shook his head. I'm not training to be promoted. He began, I'm training so I can protect my precious people. I've been unable to help my friends with my own power and want to change that. I don't want to watch as my friends get hurt and rely on something that isn't my own power. I want to be someone they can always rely on. Ino looked at Naruto in a whole new light. She hadn't expected an answer like that and gained a new respect for the fellow blonde. His dream of being Hokage didn't look like a ridiculous idea anymore. She actually believed that with more experience, he could actually become Hokage one day. I have to go, Ino. I'm really tired, Naruto said with a weary smile. Ino smiled. I'll see you later, okay? Naruto gave a foxy grin. Of course, maybe we could train together one day. Ino nodded in agreement. I'll get stronger too. Naruto looked at Ino in confusion. You were right about what you said. I feel like a burden on my team sometimes, and I want to change that. I'll follow your example and get stronger. Naruto smiled. You'll get stronger for sure, Ino. He said with a grin, "We should train together sometime." Ino grinned. "Just you wait, Naruto. I'll be a lot stronger next time we meet." "Don't think that I'll just let that happen." Naruto smiled. "I'll get stronger so we can both protect our precious ones." Ino gave Naruto a sweet smile. "Now go get some rest, or you won't be able to train tomorrow." Naruto chuckled in response and left the store with a single wave. I knew he would be a good friend. Inoichi stretched as soon as he entered his home. It was past midnight and he had had an annoying mission. He was supposed to travel to a nearby village and stop a small gang of thugs who apparently had some information on Orochimaru. It turned out that the thugs had said that they knew Orochimaru in order to gain recognition. He smiled as he made his way to his room. It was always nice to come home to a loving family after a long mission. When he entered his room, he was surprised to see Miki awake. She usually fell asleep right after Ino, so it was strange of her to stay up this late. "Is anything wrong, Miki?" Inoichi asked as he took off his ninja sandals. Miki smiled and shook her head. "I just haven't been able to sleep." She admitted, Ino brought a boy home today." Inoichi instantly perched up at the mention of her daughter and a boy. "Who was it?" "It was Naruto," Miki said. Inoichi raised a brow at this. "I thought that she didn't know him that well." Miki smiled. "Apparently she does." She said with a yawn, "He's a good influence on her." She was talking about taking her training seriously when he left. Inoichi looked taken back before smiling. "Did she now?" He asked with pride on his voice. "I'm glad she'll take it seriously. She has a lot of potential, and I know she'll surpass me one day." Miki got a sad look on her face and looked down. "You were right about Naruto?" she said. Inoichi looked at her with a look of confusion. He's completely afraid of meeting with adults. It was sad to see how he reacted when he saw me. He looked so afraid. Inoichi smiled sadly and laid in bed with his wife. "It'll be fine, don't worry." He said to his wife, "He has Ino now. I'm sure she'll get rid of his fear of stranger. It might be hard since I suspect is a trauma, but she'll get it done." Miki smiled. "I believe she will, and maybe he'll help Ino with her own problems." With that, the two fell asleep, hoping that Ino could fix the mistakes the village had made. The next day, Naruto woke up with a smile. Today would begin his real training, and he would take the first step into his sort of promise with Ino. When he thought about it, it was a little strange to have become good friends with Ino in such a short time. It helped that they had a lot in common, and he wondered why they hadn't spoken more in the past. He pushed those thoughts away and prepared for training. He put on some clean clothes, ate a light breakfast, and walked out the door with a smile. He had made a good friend in Ino, and he would show her that he could become a lot stronger. CH for the nine-tailed fox. It had been 1 week since Naruto's training with Jiraiya had started. The blonde had improved by leaps and bounds and didn't appear to be slowing down. Jiraiya was proud of his student, even though he wouldn't be telling him anytime soon, and knew that he would be the only one capable of surpassing the fourth. If it weren't for the boy's fear of using the Kyuubi's chakra, then he would easily be high Chunin level. Jiraiya had hinted that he wanted Naruto to use the fox's chakra, but Naruto would refuse. Naruto had improved on. What he had said were his weaknesses. The boy had easily grasped the toad-style taijutsu. It had been difficult at first, since Naruto would always rush into the attacks, but Jiraiya had drilled that out of him. The blonde was on his way to mastering the taijutsu, but, again, would have been a lot better mixed with the Kyuubi's chakra. It was a shame for Naruto to ignore something that would give him a great advantage over any other ninja. The blonde had mastered the 2 wind chakra control exercises already. Naruto had already attempted to use the jutsu Kakashi had given him, but had some difficulty performing them. Sometimes the jutsu wouldn't have enough power behind them, while other times Naruto would put too much chakra behind the jutsu, making the attack too hard to control. The boy was making some progress, but would need help on his wind jutsu. Naruto had also improved on his sealing. It had been hard to make the boy pay attention when they started, but when he got the basics down, he began to soak everything up like a sponge. The blonde could now use his own seals for basic stuff like packing things into scrolls, making paper bombs, and making restriction seals. It would take a while for Naruto to learn advanced sealing, and Jiraiya had a feeling that this would be difficult for Naruto to learn. The only thing that the boy still struggled in was summoning. He had continued to summon weak toads, and had even summoned a tadpole once. Jiraiya knew that in order to get his student to master summoning, he would need to get the boy to use the fox's chakra. It would be hard to get Naruto to use it since he didn't plan on using that chakra anytime soon. The Sannin would have to trick Naruto into using it, but knew that Minato wouldn't approve if he still lived her. Jiraiya sighed as he thought about what the boy still needed to learn. It would take time to train the boy, and from what he heard, the Akutsuki had begun to move. They hadn't captured any Jinchuriki, but they had begun to prepare to do so. Jiraiya would need to train the boy in order to make him strong enough to protect himself. This would require his full attention, but he couldn't stay in the same place for too long. This meant that he had to take the boy on a long training trip. The sound of giggling was heard, and Jiraiya smiled. He would push his thoughts aside for now. Right now, there was potential research material waiting for him. Naruto walked through town with a smile. Jiraiya had treated him to ramen since his training was going great. The Sannin had asked if he liked any girl, and, though skeptical at first, Naruto admitted to having a crush on Sakura. Jiraiya had then asked him to find her and give her a hug or kiss, and that they would meet for training the following day. Naruto had been flabbergasted but agreed to give her a hug when Jiraiya said that it was part of his training. So Naruto was currently looking for his teammate with his usual fake smile. He spotted the pink-haired girl on the distance and gulped. He knew what would happen if he just outright asked her, so that left catching her by surprise. The girl would probably hit him when he hugged her. Naruto thought that maybe Jiraiya had asked him to do this in order to test his resistance. The blonde walked up to his teammate and waved. "Hey Sakura," Naruto greeted with his usual cheerfulness. Sakura frowned. "Naruto, shouldn't you be training or something? You're up against Neji after all," she said. "He is a genius like Sasuke, so he'll be hard to beat." Naruto frowned. "As if Sasuke could actually beat me." The blonde crossed his arms and huffed. "I'm actually in the middle of my training." "What kind of training?" Sakura asked. The blonde gulped and had a light blush on his face. "WLUC. The team began. What's that?" Naruto pointed behind Sakura, and the moment she turned around hugged her around the waist. Sakura fumed. "Naruto." She punched the blonde away before walking away with a stomp on her step. "Stupid pervert." Naruto sat on the ground and found that his nose was bleeding slightly. "Man, Sakura packs a punch. I have to commend Ino on actually fighting her when I next see her," the blonde murmured. "You know that you're not really supposed to throw yourself at a girl, right?" came a voice. Naruto looked up and found himself in front of Ino. "Hey Ino," he said with a smile, "what are you doing here?" Ino sighed. "I just came back from my training with Asuma-sensei." She explained, "But that doesn't matter right now. You're bleeding, Naruto." The blonde shook his head. "I'm okay, don't worry." He stood up and smiled. "A bloody nose is not too bad." The kunoichi frowned and crossed her arms. Naruto knew that look and sighed. "You know where we're going already, right?" Ino asked. Naruto nodded in understanding. "Let's go." Naruto followed Ino with a pout. Ino would take him to her house again and look at his wounds. They had been spending more time together since their semi-promise and had come to know each other a lot better. Whenever Ino would see Naruto in bad condition after training, she would take him to her house and fix him up, though Naruto still avoided bumping into her mom. The two blondes had been keeping up with each other's improvements. Naruto was happy to know that Ino had actually taken his words to heart and had improved on her skills. Ino had learned that she had a water affinity and had begun to learn how to control water with her chakra. Asuma had told Ino that she had good chakra control and it would only be a few days until she mastered the water element. For that same reason, he had gotten Kurenai to teach the girl some genjutsu, which she picked up rather easily. Her chakra capacity was still kind of low, but had been improving as her stamina. The two would get together on their days off training and teach each other any new things they learned. Naruto had been teaching Ino how to control wind chakra, while Ino, in turn, taught Naruto how to control water chakra. Though they hated to admit it, the two were doing completely horrible. It was true that a ninja could pick up a second nature, but that took a long time. The two blondes had made little progress, but still tried whenever they got the chance. When the two finally got to Ino's home, they entered and made their way to Ino's room. Naruto had become quite familiar with the home since he was there constantly. Ino still told him to talk to her parents if he could, but he would be too nervous to do so. He wanted to make Ino happy, since she was a good friend, but his past experiences with adults made him keep his distance from them. "Sit down while I get the first aid kit," Ino said with a sigh. Naruto was a good friend, but Ino was mad at his inability to stay safe. Though she had to admit that she actually enjoyed healing his wounds since it made her feel needed, and she was glad to help Naruto get better. Naruto sat on the all-too-familiar chair and ran a hand through his hair. The blonde was glad that Ino would worry about him and go to the trouble to heal his wounds, but he hated to bother people, much less his friends. Ino emerged from the bathroom with the first aid on hand. The teen couldn't help but sigh. He was getting tired of the burning brown stuff Ino would put on his cuts. Ino gave Naruto a smile. "Don't worry, I'll get you cleaned up in no time," she exclaimed cheerfully. Naruto smiled back. Even if the stuff Ino would put on him burned like hell, he was glad to see her smile. Ino had become one of Naruto's most important people, and he would do anything to see her happy. "Thanks, Ino," he said with a smile. "Don't mention it," she replied happily. With that, Ino began to work on the area around Naruto's nose. She saw that part of the skin had been torn off with the punch the blonde received. "Remind me not to piss off forehead." Naruto chuckled. "She packs a nasty punch," he replied, wincing slightly as Ino put the brown stuff on his wound. Ino frowned. "Why would she do this to you? Next time I see her, I'll give her a piece of my mind," she declared. "What's wrong with her anyway?" Naruto laughed nervously. "You don't have to do that," he said. "It was kind of my fault anyway." Ino sighed. "Okay, I'll drop it, but if she ever hurts you again, I'll knock some sense into her." She finished working on Naruto's wound and patted him on the head. "All done." Naruto pouted and crossed his arms. "Don't treat me like a baby." Ino giggled and shook her head. "You're really something, Naruto." She smiled and held out her hand. "All done. You may leave now." Naruto smiled and took Ino's hand. "That's so nice of you," he joked. "I really do need to get back to my training." Ino helped Naruto up, and the two began to walk out of the house. Ino looked confused. "I thought that you were done with your training with Jiraiya by this time of day?" The orange-clad ninja smiled. "I am done training with him for today, but I have to do some training of my own," he explained. "I'm having trouble with my wind jutsus and have to practice." "You're already practicing your jutsus?" Ino asked in surprise. Naruto nodded with a grin. "Well, why don't you ask Asuma-sensei for help? He's a wind user after all." Naruto smiled in excitement. "What are we waiting for? Let's go see him." Ino sighed. "You're really loud sometimes, you know?" Despite herself, Ino smiled. "Fine, let's go see Asuma-sensei." With that, the two blondes left the home to meet with Asuma. Ino led Naruto to Team 10's training ground. It was very similar to Team 7's training ground, with the only difference being a small hill next to a rocky area. From the condition the rocky area was in, Naruto guessed that it was used for sparring or training. Asuma stood on the training ground with Shikamaru and Choji. He gave the two blondes an odd look before walking over to them. "What are you guys doing here?" "Your training is over for today, Ino," Asuma said with a look of slight confusion. Ino smiled. "We didn't come here for my own training. I already trained a lot," she explained. "We came here hoping that you could help Naruto with his own training." Asuma raised a brow. "Why would you need my help?" he asked Naruto. Ino elbowed Naruto's ribs as a sign to start talking. The blonde winced and glared at Ino. "Why'd you do that?" Ino returned the glare. "I'm signaling you to tell him why you need his help." Naruto frowned. "Well, you shouldn't have signaled me like that." He poked Ino on the side, making her yelp. "See, it hurts when you hit someone on the ribs." Ino blushed in anger. "Why'd you do that?" she exclaimed before elbowing him on the side again. Asuma watched the exchange in amusement. He was glad that his student had made a new friend, and from what he could see, they were quite close. The Jonin chuckled. "What do you need my help with, Naruto?" Naruto stopped poking Ino and turned to Asuma. "I'm having some trouble using my wind jutsus, and Ino said that you might be able to help." Asuma ran a hand through his beard. "It's quite rare to see wind users in Konoha." He began. "Have you done any of the chakra control exercises?" Naruto nodded. "I've done the leaf and rock cutting exercises." Asuma smiled in approval. "So I take it that you're having problems with the power behind the jutsu?" he asked. Naruto nodded. "Very well, I'll help you out. It might take a few days, so I want you to come here whenever you can. You'll be training with Team 10 from now on." Ino smiled. "That'll be great, Asuma-sensei," she said in excitement. "I only hope you can keep up with us, Naruto." Naruto grinned. You're the ones who aren't going to be able to keep up with me. He said, thanks for helping me out, Asuma-sensei. Asuma grinned. Don't worry about it, kid. He began, we'll begin tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Got it, Naruto said with a smile. If he was able to master the jutsu, then his skills would have improved overall. He would have the strength to protect his friends in no time. He made a note to thank Ino later. She didn't know how much she had helped him with everything. He was glad to call her a friend and was even happier to get to spend more time with her. He really looked forward to his training with Team 10. Naruto sat on the ground in front of Asuma. The Jonin had been explaining the concepts of wind chakra. Ino was sitting against a tree and watching the two train. Shikamaru and Choji had been given the rest of the day off and left the training grounds. Naruto learned that wind chakra came from his surroundings, not like other elements that came from within. What jutsu are you trying to learn? Asuma asked once he was done with his explanation. I've only tried 2 so far, Naruto informed. One is the spiraling wind ball, and the other is the wind wave. Asuma nodded. Those have great use in battle. He said, they are easy to master once you get a hold of the basics. In order to use the spiraling wind ball, you need to keep molding the chakra after gathering it. As for the wind wave, what you need to do is create a smooth end instead of a sharp one, as you learned in your training. I want you to use the jutsu with the things I told you in mind. Asuma pointed at a large boulder. Use the jutsu on that boulder and remember what I told you. Naruto nodded and stood up. He stared at the boulder in complete seriousness and took a deep breath. He blew into his hand and began to mold the wind chakra. A ball of compressed air formed on his hand. It wavered slightly, but it was still passable. Wind style, spiraling wind ball. Naruto yelled as he ran at the boulder. The blonde slammed the ball into the rock, making the attack break apart pieces of the rock before unleashing the compressed wind in a small explosion. Naruto grinned when he saw the large hole on the boulder. This attack had been a lot better than any of the others he had done. Way to go, Naruto. Ino cheered with a smile. Asuma nodded in approval. That was very good, Naruto, but you didn't use the attack like it was supposed to. He said with a sad smile. You were supposed to throw the ball, not keep it in your hand like that. Let's see the next one. Got it, Naruto said with a nod. The blonde flashed through hand signs and began to gather wind chakra. Wind style, wind wave. The teen swung his hand, and a large wave of air shot towards the boulder. It hit with great impact and broke small pieces of the rock. That was great, Naruto. Asuma praised. Take into mind that wind wave is used to push people aside instead of hurting them. Naruto smiled. All he needed to do now was perfect his spiraling ball and start practicing his other 2 jutsu. Thanks for the help, Asuma-sensei. Don't mention it. Asuma replied, I'm sorry to say this, but I have to go. I promised I would be somewhere, and it's getting kind of late. I'll see you 2 tomorrow. The Jonin disappeared in a puff of smoke with a look of worry on his face. Will he be all right? Naruto asked Ino. Ino smiled. Don't worry about it. He's probably late for a date with Kurenai-sensei. She looked at Naruto's clothes and smirked. I have a surprise for all your hard work, Naruto. Really? Naruto asked in excitement. Yup, Ino said with a smirk. Just follow me. She smiled inwardly when she heard Naruto cheered. She had gotten to know the blonde and knew that he wouldn't be too happy with the surprise. What? Why are we here? Naruto exclaimed with a frown. Ino's surprise had turned out to be a clothes shop. Ino frowned. Look at the stuff you wear. She deadpanned. You need to get some clothes that make you look more serious. The blonde pouted. There's nothing wrong with my clothes, he said with his arms crossed. Besides, I'm not sure this store is for me. He really didn't want to get thrown out in front of Ino. That would only raise questions, and he would be forced to tell her about the fox. The kunoichi smiled. Don't worry about it, Naruto. She said, I'm sure that you'll like this store. It opened a few months ago and has the best clothes from neighboring villages. Everything there, even the workers, are from other villages. Naruto's expression changed into a hopeful one. Are you sure everyone there are from different villages? He smiled when he saw Ino nod. This would mean that they might not know of his condition. Fine, let's go. Ino smiled and took hold of Naruto's sleeve before dragging him in. The inside of the shop was pretty spacious and had many people looking around. He noticed that some of them threw him dirty looks, but the workers simply kept to themselves. Welcome. A female worker with long brown hair greeted. Please call for me if you need help looking for certain clothing. Ino smiled. We're looking for shinobi clothing. She pointed at Naruto. It's for him. So could you show us to what would fit him? The worker smiled at the two and got a weird look on her eye. It's always nice to see young couples shopping together. Naruto's and Ino's right eye twitched at the mention of the word couple. Follow me. I'm sure we'll find something you'll like. The woman led them to an area with many pieces of clothing for shinobi. Some of them had metal plates and some had many hidden compartments. Naruto's eyes immediately landed on a lone orange and black jacket. He instantly ran over to it and smiled excitedly. Don't even think about it. Ino snapped. We're here to get rid of the orange. Get some other colors. Naruto pouted and crossed his arms. Fine, he said with a sigh. I'll get something else. The worker giggled. We have some selection over here, she said, gaining Ino's attention. Please follow me. Ino followed the worker while Naruto stayed behind. The blonde had found some clothes that he actually liked, and there was no orange on them. He hated the idea of not wearing any orange, but Ino would only lash out him again if he got something with the smallest tint of orange. Ino smiled in excitement. This is perfect, she declared. Ino was holding a purple t-shirt and a pair of purple pants for Naruto. She thought of finding matching ninja sandals, but noticed the absence of said blonde. Where did he go? Here I am, came a loud voice. Ino turned around and gasped. Naruto was dressed in a new wardrobe, with no sign of orange. The blonde wore dark blue pants with a kunai hustler on his right thigh. He wore a pair of black ninja sandals and a pair of black fingerless gloves with small metal plates, like his teacher Jiraiya. He also wore a long-sleeved black shirt with a white spiral on its back. He had also changed his headband from blue to black. Ino thought that it was a much better and neat improvement. Ino gave Naruto an approving smile. Not bad, Naruto, she said. You actually look like a ninja now. Naruto frowned. Clothes don't make the ninja. He stated, I'm going to go pay. You can wait for me outside if you want. Ino nodded and went outside. Once there, she gave off a big sigh. It had been a very long day for her and was glad that it would be over soon, since the sun was already setting. She had been glad to have spent the day with Naruto, since she felt that she could be herself when she was with him. She would show her weak side and trust Naruto not to take advantage of it. Ino was glad to have a friend whom she could trust this much. Naruto came out of the store with a sad look. Gamma had taken quite a blow today, but would survive. The blonde hated to hurt his companion like that, and wouldn't it be doing it again anytime soon. Ino smiled when she saw Naruto come out. Ready to go? She asked. Naruto nodded. Do you need me to walk you home? Ino gave a small smile and shook her head. I'll be okay, she said. I need some time alone anyway. Naruto gave Ino a genuine smile. Thank you, Ino. I just took you to a shop. It wasn't a big deal, Ino responded with a grin. Naruto shook his head. No, thank you for everything. He gazed at her eyes, and she couldn't help but blush. Her heartbeat rose due to the intensity of his gaze. You've been really good to me. So, thank you for all you've done for me. I'll see you later. With a single wave, Naruto made his way home. Ino stood frozen on the spot. She had been completely thrown off by what Naruto had said. The girl smiled. That idiot had made it seem like he hadn't done anything for her. If only he knew how much he had done for her. He had made her take training seriously and had given her a reason to get stronger. She didn't want to be a burden on anyone and would get stronger to help others. No, Ino began before smiling towards Naruto's retreating figure. Thank you, Naruto. Naruto panted and frowned. No matter what he did, he still wasn't able to summon bigger toads. Like usual, he had gone to see Jiraiya at the waterfall where they would always train. Jiraiya had told him that his usual training would be postponed until he could summon bigger toads. The blonde could feel that he was running out of chakra and gritted his teeth. He was getting frustrated with his lack of improvement. That's enough, kid, Jiraiya said with a serious look. I'm going to take you to a place where you'll be able to master summoning. The blonde gave Jiraiya a confused look. If the Sannin really knew of a place like that, then why hadn't he taken him there earlier? It didn't make much sense, but considering that he was dealing with Jiraiya, it didn't have to. Where is that place, Jiraiya-sensei? The Sannin grinned. Now where would be the fun in just telling you, kid? He motioned for Naruto to follow as he left their training spot. As Jiraiya leapt through trees, he looked back to see Naruto trying to keep up with him. The Sannin sighed when he thought of shat he was about to do. He had no doubt that Minato would have never approved, but it was necessary for the well-being of Naruto. There were S-class ninja after him, and if he didn't learn to control the Nine Tails, then he was doomed. The Sannin broke from his line of thought when he saw his destination on the distance. Jiraiya jumped down and landed on a small clearing. This is it, Naruto. Naruto looked around with a frown. What gives? There isn't anything special about this place. The blonde exclaimed. Jiraiya frowned. Be quiet. The Sannin exclaimed. Naruto instantly got quiet and looked at Jiraiya in confusion. I brought you here so you could stare death on the face. Naruto looked confused. What are you talking about, Jiraiya-sensei? The blonde asked. Jiraiya didn't say anything, only raised his hand and pushed him away. Before he knew what happened, Naruto was falling large in endless chasm. He didn't know what Jiraiya had been thinking, but tried to hold on to something. He tried to stop his fall by grabbing onto the walls of the chasm, but found that they were too slippery. The blonde was out of chakra from the constant usage of the summoning jutsu, meaning that he couldn't use any of his ninjutsu to help him. His vision started to blacken before he finally lost consciousness. Naruto woke up in a kind of sewer. There was ankle-deep water and not much light except for the brownish glow of the walls. The place looked vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. He looked around before hearing deep breathing and, most of all, warmth. The blonde walked towards the source of the warmth and found himself in front of a cage. What is this? He asked himself. He looked at the large cage in wonder before finally gazing at an advanced restriction seal. This must be. A large face made itself known from inside the cage. It had a large evil grin and piercing red eyes. Hello, Naruto. It growled. Naruto gaped. KQB. Ch5 another Jinchuriki? Naruto looked at the giant face of the fox in fear. It was the same face that had been on his dream. The same smile that had laughed as it killed all those precious to him. The blonde felt memories of the dream come back to him and gritted his teeth. Emotions from the dream came back, but the most dominant one was rage. The fox gave an evil smirk and growled. Come closer. The QB roared with rage. I'm going to rip you to shreds for keeping me here. Naruto trembled slightly at the demonic voice, but stood his ground. Shut up, you damned fox. The blonde growled. I need some of your chakra, or I'm going to die. I'll kill you for your insolence, brat. The fox growled in a powerful voice. If I die, then you die with me. I'm sure you don't want that, Naruto said with a frown. The QB growled before breaking into an evil smirk. I will give you some of my chakra now, but I will kill you as soon as I get the chance. You and your puny village will tremble before my power. Red chakra leaked out of the cage and made its way to Naruto. The blonde grimaced when the chakra enveloped him. The chakra was foul and had nothing but raw power. Naruto's skin was boiling due to the intensity, and his insides felt as if they were on fire. The blonde felt darkness fill his vision, and the last thing he saw was the smirking face of the QB. Naruto regained consciousness and saw that he was still falling down the chasm. He felt the fox's chakra give him strength, and he bit his right thumb, drawing blood. The only thing that would save him would be summoning a large toad. The blonde ran through hand signs and focused most of his chakra on the summoning. Naruto's eyes widened when he formed a giant cloud of smoke and landed on something squishy. The blonde looked down and saw a giant red head with many warts. The large red toad stopped its fall by taking hold of both of the rocky walls with its arms and feet. Who summoned me? Naruto heard the giant toad exclaim. Where are you, Jiraiya? For summoning me in a place like this, I'll make you pay. Naruto smiled in excitement. He had summoned a giant toad. That meant that he had mastered summoning. I summoned you. The blonde yelled from the top of the toad's head before jumping to the toad's nose. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm the one who summoned you. The toad frowned. Quit joking. No kid should be able to summon me. The chief toad Gamabunta. The chief toad jumped out of the chasm and landed on a large clearing. Jiraiya, where are you? The blonde frowned. I told you that I summoned you. He proceeded to glare at the toad. Why won't you believe me? The chief scowled. If you're so persistent, then I'll give you a test. The toad started. If you are able to stay on my head until sundown, then I'll let you become my henchman. Naruto grinned. Fine by me, Chief Toad. He ran to Gamabunta's head and prepared himself. I'll pass this test for sure. Gamabunta frowned at the last comment and, without warning, leapt from his place on the ground at a high speed. Naruto screamed as the toad jumped. It was difficult to stay in place because of how fast the toad was jumping. The blonde was trying to stabilize himself on the toad's head by using chakra on his feet. This proved hard because of all the wind against him and because the sheer speed of the toad prevented him from concentrating. Jiraiya watched the blonde with a smirk. It hadn't been wise to anger Gamabunta, and he was paying for it. The Sannin knew that the chief would be angry at him, but knew that he wouldn't mind when he told him who Naruto was. The toad had made a promise to the fourth and would honor it on Toad's honor. Jiraiya chuckled when he saw that Naruto was about to fall. Only to use his clones to save himself, the blonde proved to be a gun person to have around. The sun was setting and everything was peaceful around the Leaf Village. Well, except for the giant toad trying to shake a kid off its head. The toad soared through the skies as it jumped, before landing with a great tremor. Only Jiraiya was near the area since he was watching his student. Naruto was drenched in sweat and had a small trail of blood under his mouth from the time where he slammed into the toad's head. The fox's chakra had disappeared hours ago, and Naruto had been forced to use the little chakra he had left. The blonde was so focused on staying on the toad's head that he had lost the sense of time long ago. He was only running on the will to beat the toad and nothing else. Gamabunta was growing impatient and mad. The blonde kid had been able to stay atop his head, and the sun was already going down. He had to give it to the kid. He had a respectful determination. The toad was already considering letting the boy summon toads, but he wouldn't let him pass his test. If the blonde passed, then that would mean that the toad had been beaten on a sort of bet, and he wouldn't have that. With one last powerful heap, the toad tried to shake the blonde off. Naruto hung on to a large wart with all his strength. He felt himself lose his grip until he was finally blown off the toad. The blonde gritted his teeth and gathered whatever chakra he had left. The toad smirked when he saw the blonde fall off his head. He had been victorious, but he would still let the kids summon toads since they were always impressed by determination. Naruto was much like Jiraiya on his will to never give up. Wind style, wind wave. Naruto yelled. He launched the attack on the opposite direction of the toad in order to try to get back to the toad's head. Gamabunta gave a look of disbelief. The boy would just not quit. Naruto launched towards him at a great speed with the setting sun behind him. A shadow was cast on Naruto's face so that only his blonde hair and blue eyes were visible. At that moment, Gamabunta was reminded of his last summoner, other than Jiraiya, the fourth Hokage. I won't fail, Naruto yelled as he slammed, head first, to the toad's head. He stifled a cry at the pain on his head and watched as the sun disappeared on the horizon. The blonde smiled. He had passed the test and finally blacked out. With no more strength, Naruto fell lifelessly from the toad's head. You have guts, kid, Gamabunta said as he stopped Naruto's falling by rapping him on his tongue. The toad set him on the ground. You can summon us toads whenever you need help. With that, the chief toad disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Jiraiya walked over to his fallen student and smiled proudly at him. Naruto had done a great job with nothing but will. The blonde was truly surprising, and the Sannin had no doubt that the blonde would surpass him one day. For some reason, Jiraiya couldn't wait to get Naruto's training started. The blonde would go places, and Jiraiya would be there to guide him. For now, the blonde needed some medical attention and rest. The Sannin would have to leave town for a while, but he would be back by the time the Chunin exam finals were over. It had been 2 days since the test with Gamabunta, and Naruto was still asleep. The hit he received on the head had fractured his skull, but, thanks to the Kyuubi's healing, his skull had been healed quickly. A few of Naruto's friends had heard about his state and had visited him. Ino had visited Naruto constantly, due to their close friendship. Much to Shikamaru's annoyance, Ino had been asking everyone if they knew what happened to the blonde and wouldn't stop asking whenever their team was training. Naruto stirred from his sleep. He opened his eyes, but immediately closed them because of the brightness of the room. He didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. The last thing he remembered was his test with the chief toad. Did I pass the test? He finally opened his eyes and saw white walls and curtains. He instantly knew that he was in the hospital and felt an itch on his head. Naruto tried to scratch his head but felt bandages around his head. It was then that he remembered everything. He had passed the test by slamming into the toad. Looks like you're finally awake, Naruto heard a voice say. He turned to the voice and found the lazy genius leaning on the wall with a basket filled with fruit on his hand. Shikamaru? Naruto said in confusion. He never really thought that Shikamaru would visit him. In fact, nobody, except for the third and Irika, had ever visited him on a hospital. Shikamaru sighed. Good thing you're finally awake. Ino's been worried about you, and she wouldn't stop bothering us with questions about you. Naruto looked confused. Why would she be worried about me? Shikamaru shook his head. You're really dumb sometimes. He gave Naruto a small grin. You're our friend, and Ino's grown really close to you. Everyone who knows you're here has visited you at least once. I matter to a lot of people now. He thought with a smile, a real one this time. Enough of this sappy moment. Shikamaru said with a sigh. I brought some food to Choji, but he's not allowed to eat any of it. Do you want it? Naruto smiled. Sure, I'm pretty hungry. He got an evil smirk and chuckled. Why don't we eat this in front of Choji? You're on, Shikamaru said with a smirk of his own. The two left the room and walked over to Choji's, but stopped when they felt killer intent. Naruto turned towards the source and saw that it was coming from one of the patient rooms. He gave a glance to Shikamaru, who nodded in assurance, and the two entered the room. Inside, they saw Gaara in front of Lee's bed. His sand was leaking from under him and making its way to Lee. Shikamaru stopped Gaara with his shadow possession jutsu, while a Naruto clone moved Lee away from the sand. What do you think you're doing? Naruto exclaimed with a frown. Gaara glared at the two. I must prove my existence. He said in a cold voice, he hurt me and he must die. Shikamaru was panting lightly and sweat trickled down his face. He's too strong. I won't be able to hold him for long. Naruto grinned and prepared his spiraling wind ball jutsu. Don't worry, I'll knock him down if he does escape. Gaara got a psychotic look on his face. I can't be beaten. I have a demon sealed within me. Naruto and Shikamaru gasped. I was destined to kill ever since I was born. I prove my existence by killing anyone on my path. Naruto froze. He's just like I was. He has a demon inside of him too. Naruto's wind ball dispersed. What are you doing? Shikamaru asked with a frown. Before Naruto could answer, a new person entered the room. That's enough, everyone. This is a hospital, Guy said with a frown. He took Lee from the clone and laid him on the bed. Lee needs rest, so you shouldn't fight here. I will kill him later, Gaara said as he walked out the door. Naruto and Shikamaru left the room soon after. They didn't want to leave Lee alone, but knew that Guy knew what was best for his student. Naruto was still shocked at the revelation of Gaara being like him. Unlike Naruto, Gaara didn't have anyone to acknowledge him. Naruto remembered how it felt to be completely alone and was scared to think about it. He couldn't believe how much pain he had taken and knew that if it weren't for the third and Irika, then he would have been the same as Gaara. Man, that was way too troublesome. Shikamaru said with a sigh, what now? Naruto smiled. Despite himself, we still have to eat the fruit. Let's go. Where's that perv? Naruto muttered as he walked through the streets of Konoha. He had been looking for Jiraiya after being discharged from the hospital. The Sannin was nowhere to be found, and Naruto was starting to think that Jiraiya wasn't even in the village anymore. With no more Jiraiya, then Naruto would need to train by himself or increase his training with Team 10. Naruto sighed. I'm done looking for the perv. He crossed his arms and frowned. From now on, I'm training with Team 10. The blonde changed his direction and made his way to the Yamanaka flower shop. It was around 2 in the afternoon, so Naruto knew that Ino was currently working. Spending time with the girl had given Naruto time to know when she was free. The girl would work from 12 o'clock until 2:30. She would rest for half an hour before going training with her team until 7 o'clock. Naruto would usually walk her home, and the two would take breaks from training on the weekends. Naruto found himself in front of the shop and smiled. He was always glad to see Ino since she had become one of his most precious people. For some reason, he always found himself looking forward to see her, and whenever he wasn't with her, he found himself wishing that she was. The blonde entered the shop and saw Ino reading a magazine behind the counter. Naruto walked over to the counter and smiled. Hey, Ino. The girl nodded without taking her eyes off the magazine. Naruto sighed. Ino would break away from the world whenever she was reading something interesting. Ino. Ino flinched at the loud voice and snapped her head towards the source. Naruto? She exclaimed with a surprised look. She smiled and gave the blonde a hug. How are you? Why were you in the hospital? Are you sure you're okay? Naruto found himself blushing at the close contact. Why, yeah. he said with a nervous smile. I feel a lot better. Ino pulled away from Naruto and smiled. I'm glad, she said with a sweet smile before breaking into a frown. If you ever scare me like that again, there'll be consequences. Your whole head was wrapped in bandages. Naruto smiled apologetically. Don't worry, I'll be fine. He broke into a foxy grin. I still have to be Hokage, right? Ino smiled and shook her head. What are you doing here anyway? I came here to ask you something, he said with a smile. What is it? Ino asked with a confused look. Naruto grinned. Apparently, Jiraiya-sensei left town, so I was wondering if I could train more time with you guys? Ino couldn't help but smile. Of course. It's always fun to have you around. Asuma-sensei won't have a problem with it. I have a problem with this, Asuma said with a serious expression. Ino's face fell. What do you mean? She frowned and crossed her arms. I don't see anything wrong with Naruto training with us. Asuma sighed. If he trains with us all the time, then you two will get distracted. Asuma shook his head when he saw the two blondes give him an odd look. He guessed that they still hadn't noticed. Fine, he can train with us. Naruto and Ino cheered. Asuma couldn't help but smile, though the two didn't know it. They had a deep bond. The two were alike in many ways, and Asuma was glad that they made each other happy. He was especially glad that Naruto had made Ino take her training seriously. Naruto, come here for a moment, Asuma said. Naruto walked over with a curious expression. I have a new exercise for you. Asuma took out a small knife and gave it to Naruto. That's one of the knives I use for battle. They can be infused with wind chakra to have a longer reach and enhanced power. He explained, I want you to infuse that knife with chakra, and if you surprise me, then I'll let you keep it. Naruto smiled in excitement. Don't worry, Asuma-sensei. I'll have this down in no time. The blonde went over to the nearby river and took off his shirt. What are you doing? Asuma asked in slight confusion. Naruto grinned. Jiraiya-sensei was teaching me how to dispel genjutsu and taught me how to incorporate chakra into things. The blonde explained, if I'm right, all I have to do is use the same method to incorporate chakra into the knife and then mold it like I did with the leaf and rock exercises. Asuma broke into a small grin. The blonde had gotten the concept down pretty easily. That's all there is to it. Good luck. Ino smiled at her friend. Naruto had gotten down what to do pretty quickly. By spending time with the blonde, Ino had deducted that Naruto hid his true capabilities. For what purpose, she did not know, but what she did know was that if Naruto was serious all the time, then he would make most of them look like idiots. Ino had been encouraging Naruto on showing his true self and was glad to see that he was slowly doing so. Stop drooling over Naruto, Ino, Shikamaru said with a sigh. We have to start training. Ino blushed and glared at Shikamaru. I wasn't staring at him, she declared. I was just lost in thought. Shikamaru sighed. Blondes were really troublesome, but most of all loud. He didn't understand why the two wouldn't just come out and say it, but then again they might not even realize it. The genius pushed those thoughts away. Worrying over what Ino and Naruto felt was way too troublesome. He was already forced to train, so why bother thinking about the blondes? The worst thing was that he had to fight a blonde on the Chunin exams. That would be such a pain. A week passed, and things couldn't be better for Naruto. He had grown close to the Ino-Shikacho trio. Naruto would be often found eating with Choji after their training was over. Shikamaru and Naruto had developed a good friendship due to their shogi matches in which Shikamaru, much to his annoyance, actually had to try, though he viewed Naruto as a worthy adversary. Naruto and Ino had grown even closer to a point where they would spend most of their free time together. The whiskered blonde still chased after Sakura, but his attempts had greatly lessened. The blonde had learned to infuse wind chakra onto Asuma's knife in 3 days, due to the help of his clones and knowledge with chakra manipulation. Asuma had been impressed and gave Naruto the knife, and even taught him how to use it in battle. Naruto had also learned to use all of the jutsu Kakashi gave him, though he still used too much chakra when performing them. The blonde was glad of the progress he had made and knew that he had a good chance of beating Niji. Only 1 day remained until the Chunin exam final started. Naruto walked through town with his usual obliviousness to those around him. He had been told to rest since the finals were the following day. Naruto had nothing to do since most of his friends were busy at the moment. Ino would be working, Choji was home, Shikamaru was spending the day watching the clouds, and Sakura was nowhere to be found. The blonde sighed. Days like this were boring to the blonde. With nothing else to do, Naruto figured that he would visit Ino and see if he could help with anything. He helped around the shop from time to time, and Ino greatly appreciated it. Naruto had run into Ino's mom from time to time, but he was getting better at talking to her. The woman was nice and treated him like a person, not a thing. Thinking about his old treatment, Naruto couldn't help but think of Gaara. They both had had the same life filled with nothing but loneliness and cold glares. Naruto had been lucky to have met people who acknowledged him while Gaara had nobody. Gaara had been left on that dark place while Naruto had been taken away from it. The blonde knew that Gaara was stronger than him because he had been able to live his whole life like that. Naruto dismissed those thoughts when he saw that he was approaching the Yamanaka flower shop. He entered the shop with a grin. Something about the shop would always put him at ease. Maybe it was getting to spend time with his friend or the smell of flowers. "Hi, Naruto." Ino greeted with a smile. "What are you doing here?" Naruto smiled back. "There's nothing to do, so I thought of paying you a visit," the blonde said. "Got anything for me to do?" "Well, there are some seed bags that need to be moved," Ino said. "But why would you waste your time here?" Naruto grinned. "I'm not wasting time," he said as he walked over to the bags. "I'm glad to help you out." Ino smiled in appreciation. "Thanks, Naruto. I'll make it up to you someday." She looked at Naruto with a smile. "Nervous about tomorrow? You're going up against a genius." Naruto huffed. "As if I'd get beaten by Neji." He picked up a bag and placed it on a small cart. "I've been working my butt off all month. I'm not going to let Neji beat me." Ino giggled. "Don't worry, Naruto. I'm sure you'll win. Besides, you'll have me cheering for you." She said with a smile. "My cheers work wonders, just so you know." Naruto chuckled. "It'll be nice to have someone rooting for me," he said as he placed another bag of seeds on the cart. "Everyone thinks that Neji will win, but I'll show them what I'm made of." "I'm sure you will, Naruto," Ino said with a smile. "Thanks, Ino," Naruto said with the same look he had given her before. His eyes shone with appreciation, and she found herself staring into his eyes. Her heartbeat rose, and a blush spread through her face. She didn't know what she was feeling, but it was a comfortable feeling that made her feel that she would be safe with Naruto. Ino didn't know what this feeling was, but she would find out. Neji, Shino, Kankuro, Temari, Shikamaru, Gaara, and lastly Naruto stood in the fighting area of the large stadium that housed the Chunin exam finals. Naruto was worried about Sasuke not making it in time. The proctor, Gunma, had delayed the beginning of the finals a few minutes in order to give Sasuke more time, but the Uchiha still hadn't shown up. Gunma was currently talking to the Hokage up on a balcony that overlooked the entire fight area. The proctor went back to the fight area and cleared his throat. "We will move on to the first fight," Gunma said in a loud voice. "Everyone but Neji, Hyuga, and Naruto Uzumaki leave at once." The Genin left the fight area, leaving only a confident Naruto and a smug Neji. The Hyuga looked at Naruto with a look of disgust. The blonde had only won the first round due to a vulgar action. It was fated for Naruto to lose. "Why don't you give up right now?" Neji asked with a frown. "People like you are fated to lose against me." Naruto grinned. "I'm not going to lose to you. I have a dream to accomplish, and I'm not going to let you slow me down." Naruto slipped into his Toad Taijutsu style and smirked. "I'm going to teach you that fate can be a bitch." The Chunin exams finals begin now. "Are you two ready?" Gunma asked. Receiving a nod from the two Genin, Gunma grinned. "Begin." Ch6 The finals begin. Naruto ran at Neji with his confident smirk never leaving his face. The blonde threw a punch that was easily blocked by the Hyuga, who countered with a punch of his own. Naruto blocked the punch and threw another. The two engaged in a fury of punches and kicks. The two were even with each blocking every single strike. Most of the crowd was impressed with the blonde since he was trading blows with a Hyuga on equal level. Neji frowned. "How is he able to match me in taijutsu? It is my fate to win, not his." The Hyuga thought as he and Naruto threw punches. The blonde threw a clumsy kick and Neji smirked. This was the opening he was waiting for. Neji threw an open palm at Naruto, but his eyes widened when he saw a smirk on Naruto's face. The blonde crouched under the kick before jumping slightly and delivering a head, but to Neji's jaw. The Hyuga was knocked away, and Naruto followed his attack with a punch that made contact with Neji's stomach. Neji was pushed away, but managed to strike Naruto's left shoulder. The Hyuga jumped away from the blonde and glared. He couldn't believe that a no-name was able to match him in taijutsu. Naruto's style wasn't better, it was just too random to counter. The blonde would move around with a slight hop on his step and would use random attacks, like the headbutt. Naruto smirked. I thought you were stronger than that. He declared, beating you will be a walk on the park. Fool, Niji said with a glare. I was the victor on our exchange of taijutsu. Just look at your hands. The blonde looked at his hands in confusion and saw small cuts all around them. What the hell? We Hyugas are able to use chakra with each strike, Niji said. We can also strike chakra points with the help of our Byakugan. So what? Naruto exclaimed with a frown. That doesn't mean that you'll win. We shall see about that, Niji said with a frown. Byakugan. Veins appeared around Niji's eye, and his pupil became barely visible. Naruto ran at Niji again and threw a punch that was easily blocked. The blonde hopped to his right and threw another punch, but it was knocked away. Niji smirked and struck Naruto on the chest with great force. Naruto sailed through the air before falling on the ground with a hard thud. Now you see that it is impossible for you to win, Niji said. Fate has declared me the winner and no amount of determination will change that. Naruto spit out blood and slowly stood up while clutching his chest. You got one lucky punch on me, he said with a growl. I'll beat some sense into you and show you that fate can be changed. You're a fool, Uzumaki, Niji said with a frown. And damn proud of it, Naruto exclaimed as he ran at Niji. The blonde threw a punch, but it was easily blocked. Naruto didn't let up and threw punch after punch. Niji gritted his teeth. The blonde was awfully close to breaking through his defenses. He had to do something. 8 trigrams palm rotation. Niji yelled. Naruto's eyes widened as Niji started to spin and release chakra. Before Naruto knew what happened, he was struck almost everywhere on his body and was knocked away from Niji. The blonde landed on the ground and gritted his teeth in pain. D-damn, Naruto gasped out as he tried to stand. You are finished, Niji said. Give up now. Naruto smirked and stood up. I still have a lot under my sleeve. The blonde spit out some blood before glaring at Niji. This match just started. There's no way I'm giving up. Niji deactivated his Byakugan and smirked. I'll show you that fate is on my side. I won't use my Byakugan to fight you, and I'll still be victorious. I'll prove you wrong, Naruto said with a frown. Ino watched Naruto's match from the stands. She was sitting next to Sakura and Choji. In front of her sat Tenten, who had said that Naruto wouldn't be able to beat Niji. Ino had defended her friend, much to the surprise of Sakura, and had told them that Naruto would win. Choji had agreed with her, while Sakura thought that Naruto didn't stand a chance. Ino was dressed on her ninja outfit since she told Naruto that she would show him how much she had him reproved after his matches were over. Ino had a worried look on her face. Naruto was getting pretty hurt while Niji had only been hit twice. She still thought that Naruto could win, but made a mental note to scold him for getting hurt. The kunoichi didn't like to see people hurt, which is why she mostly uses her mind attacks to restrict people. For some reason, seeing Naruto hurt made her heart wrench. She wanted to keep him safe and hated to see him bloodied and bruised. Ino guessed that she felt this way since he was her friend and hoped that the match would end soon. I told you that he was no match for Niji, Tenten started. He's a Hyuga prodigy and is fighting a nobody. It's no surprise that the blonde is getting beaten. Ino fumed. Naruto is going to win, she exclaimed. He said that he would, and he never goes back on his word. Ino's right, Choji said with a grin. Naruto's been training hard with our team. There's no way he'll lose. Naruto's been training with you? Sakura asked in confusion. Choji nodded. He trained like crazy, he said. I don't see him losing after everything he did. Ino nodded with a smile. There's no way he's losing. Ino looked at Naruto and grinned. I know it. Wind style? Naruto yelled as he ran through hand signs, devastation. Naruto put his left hand on his mouth and blew into it, creating a powerful gust of wind, blowing away dirt and rubble from the ground. The attack hit Niji with full force and knocked him against the wall. The Hyuga spit out blood and fell on the floor, gasping for air. He stood up slowly only to see 2 clones running at him. Niji dodged their attacks and hit them on the chest, immediately dispelling them, before catching his breath. Naruto stood in front of Neji with a small smirk. How was that? He taunted. Did your precious bloodline see that coming? That attack hit me because of my own mistakes. Do not think that it will happen again, Neji said as he got into his fighting stance. We'll see about that, Naruto said with a smirk before throwing a few kunai at Neji. The Hyuga used his own kunai to block Naruto's before charging at him. Neji felt heavier as he ran, but dismissed it for the moment. He threw a palm at Naruto, but the blonde jumped away and threw a horde of shuriken. Neji blocked them with a single kunai and jumped after Naruto. Neji felt as if he was running slower, but focused on his fight. He jumped at Naruto with an open palm that made contact with his chest. Neji smirked when he saw Naruto land painfully on the ground. He had hit a major chakra point, and he didn't think that the blonde would be getting up from it. He had been right. The Byakugan wasn't needed on this fight. Neji's eyes widened when he saw Naruto poof into a cloud of smoke. It was a clone? He activated his Byakugan and gasped. The ground was filled with hundreds of different chakra signatures, all belonging to Naruto. Surprise! Naruto yelled as he and hundreds of clones shot off of the ground. Let's go. Neji gritted his teeth when he saw all of the clones charging at him. 8 trigrams palm rotation. The clones were dispelled, but their sheer number pushed against Neji's dome. The Hyuga feared that they would get past his ultimate defense when he saw more and more clones charging at him. The Hokage smiled. Naruto had improved a lot. The blonde had formulated a great plan and executed it perfectly. Naruto was learning how to be a great ninja, and the third had no doubt that the blonde would get far. Impressive boy, the Kazekage commented. He's full of surprises. Indeed he is, the Hokage said. He'll grow into a powerful ninja. Way to go, Naruto. Ino cheered with a smile, kicked Neji's ass. She got a few odd looks from the people around her and blushed in embarrassment. Calm down, Ino, Sakura said with an odd look. Neji panted as he kept performing his attack. The 8 trigrams palm rotation took a considerable amount of chakra to perform. His reserves were going down, and the dome would come down any second. He was sure that the blonde's reserves were going down also, since nobody should be able to keep using shadow clones like he was doing. Naruto watched his clones attack the dome and summoned another 10, ordering them to attack. His chakra was going down, but it was to be expected since it was part of his plan. All he had to do was wait for Neji's attack to go down and perform the last part of his plan. Naruto grinned when he saw the dome waver slightly. It's almost time. Neji's attack was finally stopped and a swarm of clones jumped at him. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. Neji began to attack all the clones with strikes that were barely visible. The Hyuga defeated all of the clones and glared at Naruto. I am done with this. I will finish you right now. Let's see you try, Naruto said with a smirk. The two ninja ran at each other. Naruto threw a punch, but it was easily blocked by Neji. The Hyuga countered with an open palm, but Naruto leapt away. The blonde threw a couple of kunai at Neji, who simply jumped away before running through hand signs. Wind style, devastation, a powerful gust of wind came out of Naruto's mouth. The wind knocked Neji against a tree before Naruto grinned. I got you. Neji looked up to see a swarm of kunai coming his way. He quickly blocked them with his own before running at the Naruto clones. He stroked one of the chest before dodging a punch. Neji hit another clone on the face and another on the stomach. The Hyuga dodged a kick and countered with an open palm. Ino bit her lip as she witnessed the fight. Naruto's clones weren't hurting Neji, they were pretty much useless against him. She had no idea why Naruto would keep wasting chakra with clones, but knew that he must have a plan. You can do this, Naruto. Tenten smirked as she watched clone after clone disappear at the hand of Neji. There was no way that her teammate would lose. He was a prodigy and the strongest genin. She felt sorry for the blonde. He was putting a lot into the match, but his attacks only stalled Neji instead of hurting him. Neji panted once he finished the last clone. They were way too annoying and no match for him, no matter how many were used. He ran at the real Naruto. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. Naruto could do nothing as each strike hit home. Neji smirked, losing his Hyuga coolness, as the attacks hit the helpless blonde. His attack finally ended, and the blonde fell on the ground with a thud. This match is over, Neji said with his cool and collected attitude back. Fate can never be changed. The ground started to shake and Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Niji's eyes widened when two Narutos shot off the ground. Naruto blew into his hand and formed a ball, while the other clone took hold of Naruto's free arm. The clone flung Naruto at Niji. "This is it," the blonde yelled as he approached Niji and extended his arm. Wind style. Spiraling wind ball. The attack hit Niji on the chest, and the Hyuga was thrown away from Naruto. Niji hit the wall with a cry and lost consciousness. Naruto panted as he watched Niji's unconscious figure. The blonde broke into a grin and threw an arm on the air with a laugh. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, Genma declared as a couple of medic ninja took Niji away. All right. Naruto cheered as he left the fight area. The crowd cheered for the good fight, and Naruto waved at the crowd. He did it. Ino cheered with a smile. Way to go, Naruto. Choji cheered. I can't believe it, Tintin said with a look of disbelief. How did Niji lose? That was a good plan, Naruto, Shikamaru said with a smirk. Naruto grinned, while Shino raised a brow. What plan are you talking about? The bug user asked. Naruto hid some clones around the fight area that would throw weaker versions of Wind style. Devastation, Shikamaru explained. Since the attacks were weak, Niji didn't notice them, but they were hitting him constantly. That's why Niji was slower than Naruto whenever they ran. I see, Shino said with a nod. That really was a good plan. Attention, Gunma started. Because Sasuke Uchiha hasn't shown up, we will continue with the other matches. Shikamaru groaned. Man, that means that my match will be moved up. My match hasn't even started, but it's already a pain in the ass. I need Shino and Kankuro to come down, Gunma said. Shino prepared to go down, while Kankuro stayed still. I forfeit, Kankuro declared. The crowd booed the Sand Ninja. Temari smirked and jumped down to the fight area. She held out her fan and looked at the proctor. What's up with you? Gunma asked. It's my turn now, isn't it? Temari said while looking at Shikamaru. Gunma shook his head. Genin were always full of themselves. Shikamaru, come on down. This is complete crap, Shikamaru thought as he leaned on the railing. Why do I have to fight? Maybe I should just forfeit like that Kankuro guy. Naruto saw the lazy look on Shikamaru's face and grinned. He went behind the lazy genius and pushed him off the railing. Get out there, Shikamaru. Shikamaru landed on his back and groaned. Why does Naruto have to be so damn troublesome? I'd rather stare at the clouds than fight some girl. Temari glared at Shikamaru. The lazy idiot was just lying there and didn't appear to be interested in fighting her. The crowd started to boo Shikamaru while he just ignored everyone. Gunma just sighed and shook his head. He couldn't believe Shikamaru's laziness. That's it, Temari exclaimed with a frown. If you're not attacking, then I am. With that, Temari held up her fan and ran at Shikamaru. Man, Shikamaru thought. I knew blondes were troublesome the minute I met Naruto and Ino. I don't feel like doing anything, but I also don't feel like losing to a girl. Temari brought her fan down on Shikamaru, but gasped when she saw that he wasn't there anymore. She looked around and found him leaning against a tree with his hands on his pockets. If you're so hyped about fighting me, then let's get to it, Shikamaru said. He took out some kunai and threw them at the girl. Temari used her fan to blow the kunai away, but frowned when she saw that Shikamaru had disappeared again. Where the hell is he? She muttered to herself. Asuma watched his student with a smirk. Kurenai was sitting next to him, and she had a look of worry on her face. While Asuma trusted in his student's abilities, Kurenai didn't know what to think of the lazy genius. She had heard that Shikamaru was lazy, but she never expected him to act like that in the middle of a match. Don't worry, Kurenai, Asuma said. Shikamaru might not look it, but he's a genius. Kurenai gave a confused look. But I saw his test scores, and they were almost as bad as Naruto's. Asuma shook his head. Don't let those two fool you. He stared at his student with a smirk. Shikamaru and Naruto are a lot smarter than they let on. Shikamaru didn't do well on his tests because he thought it was too troublesome to pick up his pencil to write, while Naruto cared more about being the center of attention than some test. Naruto just started to take his training seriously, Asuma continued. He's been training with my team, and his motivation made my students take their training seriously also. Choji was there from time to time, but he had to return to the hospital after a few hours. Kurenai looked at Shikamaru in a new light. I see. Shikamaru treats his matches like a shogi game. Asuma explained. He uses many different strategies to put his opponent in a position where giving up is the only way out. I've never been able to beat him in a game of shogi, and I know that he will win this using only his mind. Shikamaru was resting against a tree that was near the wall of the fight area. The place was shadowed, so he would be able to have some peace. He thought of ways of defeating the blonde, but groaned when he heard her swinging her fan around. That girl was way too troublesome. I might as well get this over with, Shikamaru said to himself. Damn him, Temari muttered as she swung her fan. She had been using wind jutsu around the fight area in order to get Shikamaru out of his hiding place. The kunoichi was about to swing her fan again, but stopped when she saw a shadow approaching her. She jumped away and found Shikamaru standing on the shadows. So you finally decided to come out? Temari said while noticing that the shadow could not reach her past 10 meters. Shikamaru sighed. It's a real pain in the ass, but I'll fight seriously. The teen threw 2 kunai at the girl who easily blew them away. Temari watched Shikamaru in confusion. Surely his plan wasn't throwing kunai around. Even someone like him should have a kind of plan. She swung her fan, creating a huge gust of wind that knocked Shikamaru back a couple of feet. Temari prepared to attack again, but jumped away when she saw a shadow coming towards her. The shadow passed its 10-meter limit and chased after her. She looked up and saw that Shikamaru had used a kunai as a parachute in order to create more shadows for him to use. She leapt away until the shadow finally stopped. Temari sighed in relief and prepared to use her fan, but noticed that she couldn't move. What's going on? She asked herself in panic. Shikamaru chuckled. Just look at where you are. Temari looked around and noticed that she was in between 2 trees. Her eyes widened when she remembered that Shikamaru had been at the same place when he started the match. She looked at her arms and saw that they were wrapped in a strong wire. How did you? I wasn't just looking at clouds when I was lying there, Shikamaru explained. I was thinking of a way to beat you without too much trouble. When you ran at me and I leapt away, I threw a couple of kunai with ninja wire at those 2 trees. But there's more than 2 wires, Temari argued. Yes, but as the match progressed, I put more wire, Shikamaru said as he pointed at the wire that were wrapped around her legs. All those kunai that I threw in my shadow possession jutsu were just decoys while I set up the real trap. Why you? Temari said through gritted teeth as Shikamaru walked towards her with a kunai on hand. Now, the teen said with a smirk as he put the kunai on Temari's throat. Checkmate. Gunma grinned in approval. Winner is Shikamaru Nara. The crowd cheered while Shikamaru calmly made his way back to the small balcony where the participants waited their turn. He had thought of giving up, but decided against it when he remembered all the training his team and Naruto went through. Naruto had made him take his training a little more seriously, but it was still too troublesome, and not to mention that since Ino started to train harder, she had forced him to put more effort into it. Those annoying blondes would be the death of him. Way to go, Shikamaru. Ino cheered with a smile. Choji couldn't believe his eyes. His teammate had actually done a considerable amount of work and didn't give up. Choji honestly thought that Shikamaru would end up giving up or just pretending to be unconscious, but he had won. That was a great match, Sakura said with a smile. Choji nodded. I didn't think that Shikamaru would actually win. I thought that he would have ended up giving up or something. Ino smiled. Yeah, but I think he's starting to be more serious about being a ninja. Anyway, Sakura interrupted. Sasuke's match is up next. Everyone is waiting for that match, Choji said. I hope it's as good as everyone is making it out to be. Yeah, Ino agreed with a thoughtful look. I wonder if it'll be as good as Naruto's. Sakura frowned. Of course it'll be better than stupid Naruto's, she said. Sasuke is a lot stronger than Naruto, and he'll wipe the floor with that Gaara guy. Watch it forehead, Ino said with scowl. Just because Naruto isn't here doesn't mean that you can talk down on him. What did you call me, Ino Pig? Sakura said with a glare. The air grew tense and Choji was stuck in the middle. He knew how close Ino and Naruto had gotten and knew that it was a bad move to talk bad about him in front of her. For some reason, Ino had grown protective of Naruto, and she was downright scary when someone talked badly of him. I really wish I wasn't here right now, Choji thought as the 2 girls continued to glare at each other. That was great, Shikamaru, Naruto said with a grin once Shikamaru went back to the balcony. Shikamaru sighed and leaned on the railing. I should have forfeited the match. It would have been less troublesome that way. Naruto chuckled. But if you forfeited, then you would have been chewed out by Ino. You're right, Shikamaru said with a nod. Nothing is more troublesome than dealing with an angry female. Attention, Gunma announced. We will give Sasuke Uchiha a total of 5 minutes to arrive. If he doesn't, then he will be disqualified. Do you think he'll show up? Shikamaru asked. Perhaps it was wise of him to not have shown up, Shino said in an emotionless voice. Naruto shook his head. He'll be here, he said. He's not the kind of person to run away from a challenge. What is Sasuke doing? Why is he taking so long? Choji asked with a frown. He'll get here, Sakura said with a sad expression. He has to. You idiot, Ino whispered to Choji. Can't you see she's all gloomy? You don't have to make her even sadder by stating the obvious. Where is Sasuke? Asked Lee, who had just arrived, along with Guy, on a pair of crutches. Lee, Sakura, and Ino greeted with smiles. Sasuke hasn't arrived yet, Choji said. I see, Lee said with a serious look. I was hoping to see how much he has improved. Don't worry, Lee, Sakura said with a smile. Sasuke will come. Did you see Naruto's match? Ino asked with an excited smile. Lee shook his head. You should have seen it. He completely wiped the floor with that guy. Choji's sweat dropped. It was actually a close match, but I shouldn't say anything. I don't want Ino mad at me, Choji thought as he dug into his last bag of chips. The 5 minutes have passed, Gunma announced. Sasuke Uchiha is disqual. Gunma was interrupted by a whirlwind next to him. When the whirlwind died down, Kakashi and Sasuke could be seen. Sasuke wore a black version of his normal clothes, while Kakashi had a hand on his book and the other on his pocket. Hey there, Kakashi said. I hope we're not too late. You're just in time, Gunma said. Hey Sasuke, Naruto yelled from the balcony. The blonde grinned. Nice to see you made it. Sasuke smirked. I wouldn't have missed this for the world, he said back. Did you win your match? Of course, Naruto said with a smile. You better win yours so I can kick your ass later. Sasuke smirked and turned to Gaara. The sand ninja looked at Sasuke with no emotion on his eyes before jumping down to the fight area. This will be a hard fight, Naruto said to Shikamaru. Shikamaru frowned. You want to tell me what's going on? Naruto looked surprised and Shikamaru continued. You're always wary of that guy ever since the hospital incident. I know I'll regret this later, but tell me what's up with that guy. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Gaara wasn't lying, Naruto said. Shikamaru gave him an odd look and Naruto turned his gaze towards Gaara. He really does have a demon sealed inside of him. What? Shikamaru asked in shock. How do you even know he wasn't just bluffing? Naruto turned his gaze to the ground and frowned. He couldn't just tell people that he knew Gaara had a demon inside of him, because he had one also. The blonde contemplated the idea of telling Shikamaru the truth. But could he do it? Would Naruto be able to share his deepest secret and risk losing a friend?